Welcome to another episode of Summoning Insight. This time, we're going to do things a little bit differently this week. We have decided that it is more efficient and better to make sure that our guests have watched all the games, that they're up to date on the various regions we're discussing. So we're going to do...
If everyone on that whole angle, Monty, if everyone knows what our last year went for me.
That's fair. But I think I think that it's going to be better for you guys if we just have one guest, but then we have one guest focusing on one region and then another guest focusing on another region. So that way we don't have four people on at one time, one of which is not up to date on that region. We can really just focus in. It'll make watching the VODs a lot easier. So we're going to try that strategy from now on. And with that said, we will have Pobelter on in a few minutes. And then after that, we will have Jesiz, the coach of SK Gaming. So obviously lots to talk about in two teams on the rise today. Otherwise, I have to say, this was, in fact, probably one of the worst weeks of LCS I have ever seen in terms of gameplay quality this week. I felt very sad watching most of those games. There were some very entertaining games, this is true, but not entertaining for their quality, more entertaining for how painful they were to watch.
Here's another narrative that needs to be popped, which is there's two narratives that always reoccur, and neither of them are necessarily true. They're like unchecked assumptions. One is it's the team and LCS version of the old one of like, well, if this promising rookie was good in split one, just wait for the next one. Like anyone who thinks that's true, by the way, maybe just go and look into like pop music or something. You are aware why the Soft Mel album is the one that every band fails on. Because the whole point is like the first time, it's your dream, it's your chance to do it. People don't know you, they're experiencing it. Then the next one is like, now you got to follow it up and actually show you're really good. And most people, that's where they fail. Like, you know what? The fact that a young rookie comes in and does well actually means that his second split's going to be harder in some ways. He's got to not only prove that, but now people are prepared for him. They even like some of the things like they'll ban out champions he plays. So basically the team version of that goes like this. It goes, well, you guys complained about the spring split, but you know what? A lot of teams changed roster in the offseason. They're still getting up to speed and stuff. You know, they have to like get things together. They're catching up, whatever that nonsense is. Like, I don't know if you're aware, but we're on a moving train here. Like, you can only be going getting better or getting worse. There's no catching up. Like, the person in first place ain't stood at the finish line waiting for you. They're just lapping you like it's Formula One or something, boys. So at the moment, what you see right now is like these teams, some of them have gotten worse. Some of them look way worse right now. Like I agree with you. The level of play is really bad at the moment. Like I think it's comparable to the first split, but the first split had the excuse of all the roster moves. And then the other thing is this: people always mistake parity for really good competition. So I always say in Counter-Strike, my favorite era is when you have four elite teams and they can sort of all beat each other in some combination, right? You notice the key word was elite there, Monty. I didn't say I wanted to just be four teams at the top. Like, I hate it. Just, you know, like anyone can win and four teams happen to be at the top. Like, you don't want it to be. I'd rather lose one dominant team than that scenario. Like, one team at least give me great games. So Cloud9's still pretty good. Yeah. But the reason why there are 5 teams tied for second in LCS is not because the LCS is straight fire right now. And it's not the reason why. It's because every one of those teams just takes like one game every 3 or 4 games and goes, you know what? I'm just going to lose this in the most embarrassing way possible, and I'm going to look stupid. And yet, still be tied for second. So you know what? To tie it all together, does anyone remember a similar time period last split when it was Immortals was the number 2 ranked team in LCS? That's all I'll tell you right now. We're back there again. Groundhog Day.
I also think that part of the reason for the drop in quality of the LCS has been that a lot of these teams, at least, have kind of given up on winning and are more looking towards how they can improve for the future, which is definitely true of Immortals subbing in that entirely Academy roster or switching around all their players. We've seen Dignitas now using Lorlo in the top lane. At this point, it seems like I know. By the
way, can I just say this? It's another narrative I have to explode right now. Right, you know when you do that, like I'm giving one of my academy players a chance. You're not. What you're doing is giving a really old player who definitely is never going to make it another chance. This is the golden glue of the top lane. That's all you've done right now. You put golden glue of the top lane in, and you're not actually testing someone out who could be the future of your team. You're just saying, you know what? Screw this split. So I don't get that move myself at all, Monty, but whatever. It is whatever, isn't it? Like I don't know what the point in bringing the Viper is if you're just going to boot him after this many games. Like, I thought the whole point was to go all in on the guy, you know?
I agree. At least in that instance, I think I would have probably all-in on Viper for the rest of the season because he's less of a known quantity, even though we did see most of a split with him over on FlyQuest, and outside of a few good games on Riven early in the season, he didn't look that impressive for the rest of the time. Before
we'll get into dig later though, because I've got some rants for you.
We'll get into dig for you. We'll get into that with Pobelter. We have to get all of our inappropriate conversations that Pobelter can't comment on first. So, with that in mind, our first inappropriate conversation that we shouldn't be having with Pobelter is what is going on with Meteos and his tweets.
Oh, by the way, can I just chuck this out then before we get into this? You know what? This is just for your benefit, Monty. There must be some sort of error. Can you check with accounting at Cloud9? Because they're still paying for each of the episodes for me. But I was told by Reddit that actually we got fired. So can you tell them to stop paying? Because it doesn't make sense to be paying us for episodes when we're fired. Like, you know, maybe just contact Reggie directly. Because apparently he runs finances at Cloud9. You know, well, okay, I'll look up these tweets. I actually haven't seen his tweets. What's he been saying?
Oh, my God. Okay, well, I think some of them have been deleted. I'll have to link them to you real quick.
Okay, give me the gist of it, though. What was like? I guess
I should read them.
Like sub tweets about his team or something.
So he did say that he. Okay, hold on. Let me find it. He may have deleted them by now. Yeah, he deleted them. Hold on, I have to go find out what they said at the moment.
What is spicy?
So basically, he said that he was getting benched after week 3 of summer again, implying that it was exactly the same thing that happened 2 years ago when he was on 100 Thieves the first time.
Oh, I see here it says they're starting contracts instead of him.
Yeah, even though, by the way, this is an entirely different group of people. Like, his implication is that he was benched by the same people when in reality the entire GM and coaching staff is entirely different now, this split. So it's just a coincidence. And second off, he deleted a tweet that said, "Pretty weird to hear the players on my team didn't know about or agree with the decision. All credit goes to Zix, Jungle Juice, and Papa Smithy," tagging all of them. "Clearly the people not on the team know what's best for it." Which is like, maybe I wouldn't call out my entire management and coaching staff about a decision to be benched. By the way, this is the same team that had Someday quietly sitting on an academy roster for like over a split because he was an import player and couldn't play and didn't have this level of complaining. And I think if you're 100 Thieves at this point, they obviously Stunt, I think, needs to be replaced on this roster. But if you look at it, you might as well, if you're 100 Thieves at this point, try and see what else you have, just like Immortals is doing. So I don't blame them for bringing up contracts into the jungle position here. And their mid lane position.
Also add in, like, listen, I'm not a fan of like those hackneyed, like cliched sayings that people just repeat without even saying who said them. And it's just like, I mean, that wasn't God who said it, mate. I don't know what you're saying. Like, it's a fact because you remember a quote. But like, if I was Meteos, the very fact that you just said that, if you take all the variables, every variable is different except Meteos. I'd maybe just, reflect on what that might mean, Might mean maybe you did something again, mate. And here's the other thing. I'm just going to say this right now. I know why players will always be mad about this. Here's the thing I've actually learned from, I mean, you know it, Monty, but we won't go into it. But some of the things that are going on in CSGO where players kind of like act a bit entitled and expect to be able to do things like change the rules of a tournament as it's going on, right? I actually understand why they're doing it, though. And it's not for a sinister reason. It's not that they just believe players should have ultimate power. It's that when they see something unfair, they don't think there's a mechanism that they can participate in where they have agency to change it. So their approach is, right, either like try to convince people to do what they want or try and use the public sentiment against the org or whoever is enforcing the rules, right? So in this kind of a scenario, what Meteos is implying here is, it's outrageous I've been benched because my teammates didn't want me benched. What's the relevance of that? Like, that would be like if Antonio Brown was like, you know what? Actually, Juju Schuster says it's fine that I said all that stuff to him. So can I keep playing now? It's like, no, because guess what? I pay Juju Schuster's salary and your salary, and I'm telling you you're benched. Like, that's the end of it. I don't have to ask anyone's permission. It's not your team. Just like me, you don't own 100 Thieves, mate. Like, Nade Shot or whoever Nade Shot's put in charge, Papa Smithy, Zix, etc. That's actually, you've nailed it, mate. The exact appropriate people to have benched you have benched you. You've even actually made it clear that the hierarchy works with 100 Thieves. And actually, it sounds like they're getting rid of some of the problems, mate. Like, I've always thought you were a sick player, but you weren't great at this split. Let's be real.
Well, here's the other crazy thing about this is that he doesn't seem to consider the fact that his teammates might be telling his coaching staff and him two different things. Maybe they don't want to get into a conflict with Meteos, so they're saying, hey, I didn't say that we should bench you, but they might be telling the coaching staff a very different story about what they want in terms of the team. That's a completely reasonable scenario to have occurred.
Listen, there's a lot of little players out there who, listen, I'm sort of doing things a bit differently now, so I won't call them rats because that would be the old me. What I would say is there's a lot of players out there with questionable integrity. And what they would do is, as Monty's alluding to, they would say to their boss, yeah, he is actually really annoying and the things he's doing. You know what? I'd rather we try contracts as well. But then if Meteos came to them, would think the deal's already done anyway, so there's no point in me getting in trouble. And just go, yeah, you know what, Will? I wasn't even really in favour of it, mate. And the way it's been handled, I agree. It's disappointing. But you know what? What can we do? So anyway, good luck in Academy. Remember, your old mate, whatever my name is someday. Obviously, I'm doing that as a joke because he's the one who wouldn't be, is it? Like, you know, but remember, it just wasn't me, though. That's all that matters. No, obviously, they could just be lying, couldn't they? That goes without saying. And we're never going to get to the bottom of this, by the way, mate. You're just benched. That's it. End of story. Get on with your life. Sorry. It's just sports. Listen, to be fair, I tell you what, if you want to go ahead and have a career and not get benched, join Dignitas next split. They'll take anyone. Or Immortals. There you go. These two teams will take literally anyone in the world. So I'd go play there. You'd be starting your whole career.
I also think in this scenario too, it's the people he's calling out, because I can't imagine anyone more willing to be reasonable and talk someone through this than Papa Smithy and Zix. These are the guys who will take an infinite amount of their own time to sit down with you, have a conversation, be reasonable, be sympathetic to you. So to go on Twitter and blast these people is so crazy to me, because knowing both of these guys, that is, I don't see why this couldn't have been handled internally. I also would suspect, if you know those two people, that this is purely behaviorally related, not to do with his level of play, if you actually ask me. Because listen, if you look at some of the other players that they've had in their teams that they haven't benched, who weren't very good players, they, if anything, give you a million extra chances. This suggests to me that actually something Meteos was doing, like I'd imagine, something I've always suspected, that when the results go bad, since he's a guy who's played 1 billion years, Monty, people like that only tend to care about being able to play in playoffs and have chances to win championships. They don't want to play beyond like the 6th best team. So when people like that, when it goes bad, they're not very happy people to be around typically. So I would guess what happened is he himself did some things or said some things. Some of his teammates also didn't feel comfortable. They were like, yeah, well, we're losing anyway. He's not playing well and it's causing trouble. And then Papa Smithy and Zix literally had to just be like, right, even though I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, if I had to guess, they'd tell you contracts is worse than Meteos. But at this point, it's like, it ain't about contracts level. It's about getting the Meteos negative out of the equation. Contracts, your job is just do what you can, mate. You know? Let's just have a functional team. That'll be my read on the situation. It really does feel like, from watching 100 Thieves games, that their level of communication and coordination has decreased over time from the end of last split until now as well. So who knows what they're hearing in terms of in-game comms, or how cluttered they're getting, or how frustrated players are getting in some of these games. And frankly, especially after that TSM game, I would be very frustrated too if I was 100 Thieves, because TSM through that game twice, and 100 Thieves.
That's one of the only games I've seen where you can't even diss Ryoma much, and yet they still lost the game. Like, he was playing fine, mate. That wasn't even him who lost that game. So don't make every game about him. Like, no, like that was the rest of them who threw that one. So if the odd game where you get a decent game from him, you can't capitalize upon, you're in dire straits at that point in time. Like you said, TSM was just giving them, they were offering him it on a plate, like, please take it.
Yes.
And they were like, no, after you. It was like that last biscuit in British culture, you know. Anyone knows that one. That's a bit of a deep reference, whatever.
All right. Before we talk about that game, because that game was funny, and I'm sure Pobelter will have some interesting insight into it, we're going to get Pobelter on. So we're going to take a quick break while we get him in the call and get some cameras rolling, and then we'll be back with you in just a moment. We're back. We have Pobelter from CLG joining us now in order to discuss the rise of CLG. He replaced Crown, who was having some miserable performances early on. He somehow found himself with only a coaching contract to start this year. So can we begin there? What was the process of you actually joining CLG, and how the hell did this happen in the offseason that you didn't end up on a roster?
Yeah, so from the start, let's see, it was like off-season of last year, and we had just failed to qualify for Gauntlet on FlyQuest, which was really disappointing because we were having really good practice leading up to it. We didn't make playoffs, but we had just been grinding out scrims for like a month outside of the public radar, doing our best to prepare, and we thought we'd make it, but we didn't. It was off-season, and nothing was happening for like a month, and then management let me know that they were looking for other options and I should look for other options as well. Like nothing was set in stone at that point, but just getting a feel for everything. So it's like, okay, that's actually pretty normal. Everyone just wants to see what's potentially out there. So I reached out to a bunch of teams, not a bunch, but a few teams. A few teams reached out to me and said they were interested in having me as their starting mid laner, like really excited to potentially have me and be the core of their roster or whatnot. And so it's like, okay, well, even if FlyQuest doesn't want me back, it looks like I still have some other options. I didn't feel like I was fitting in well at FlyQuest anyway, so maybe this could be a good move. And then a lot of those managers just like kind of stopped responding, or
do you know what the reason would be? Like, have they got other people in the meantime? Do you know what would put them off?
I'm not sure. Things move really fast in off season a lot of the time. A lot of the times players get kind of left out in the cold, so that's kind of what happened to me, which I was really surprised by. So yeah, it was literally like on Monday a team called me and they're like, yeah, look, we're so interested in having you. Look, this is our vision for the future of our roster and we want you to be the centerpiece of it. I was like, great, that sounds good. Give me like a day or two to think about things and I'll call you back and let me know if I'm interested or not. And then I'll message them a day or two later, and then I'll be like, hey guys, what's up? I'm back. Heard you were really interested in me. What's up? And then just radio silence. Pretty much essentially getting ghosted, which doesn't feel great. And
what about this? Because another thing people often asked with like you, the big names, you, Jensen, a few of the other people who like obviously people expect to at least be on some team, even if it's the worst team in LCS. A lot of people wondered, like in your case, it doesn't sound like you got to like the negotiating table with any of them. It was just like initially an interest that never got followed up on. People wondered, was it that like you guys would have asked for too much salary? Like if you're going to be in LCS, you want a certain level, otherwise you won't play. Was there any of that involved in it?
I don't think that was the case. Like I even once that happened, I was like, oh, am I like kind of screwed? What's going on? Am I not going to find a team? I started reaching out to these teams again, as well as other teams. And I was like, hey, look, I don't even care about the salary. I just want a chance to go back on the stage and prove that I'm still a really good player. Like, look, please just give me a chance. I'll try out. I'll literally do anything. And then no one was really interested. It seems like everyone already had their plan heading into next season. And none of those plans involved me. So I just kind of had to deal with it, even though it kind of sucked. It wasn't really expected.
Don't you feel disrespected? I mean, listen, no matter what anyone says, like even in FlyQuest, like in that first split, you guys were top 4 in the split. Like you were one of the better mid laners. Like, don't you feel like the idea that like not a single one of 10 teams would give you a spot? That's kind of BS, right?
Yeah, not even like, sure, you don't have to like hand me a spot just because you feel like I deserve it or whatever. I was willing to like try out at least or anything like that.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. That's just ridiculous. So did you have any of these tryouts at all, or did everybody even turn down a tryout?
I think most of the teams didn't even have tryouts. It seems like people just had an idea for a roster in mind and then did it. It can be kind of hard to do tryouts because a lot of players are from like Europe or from Korea, and off season is their time to go back home and be with their family and friends. So it's hard to get everyone back here just to do tryouts, I guess, is their rationale. Yeah, I mean, it kind of sucked. I didn't want to be egotistical about it, and I wanted to treat it as a way that like, okay, maybe I'm actually rating myself higher than I actually am. Maybe I let things slip a little, so I should just do what I can to play better so that this won't happen again in the future. I actually called Steve from Team Liquid and I was like, hey Steve, I think I'm kind of fucked. What should I do, man? I don't think I'm gonna have a team for next season, which I didn't expect, and I just need some like advice right now. And then he ended up offering me a really great spot on Team Liquid as an assistant coach, where he was like generous enough to give me the flexibility where I would be able to like pick and choose any team that would then show interest in me.
And all you had to do was install this like weird driver on this Lenovo laptop. He said, "Oh, once you've done that, just like put it on the shelf, and then your part of the job's done." So it all worked out in the end. So no, obviously, just keep going, mate, keep going.
Yeah, so that happened, and so I was ready to be an assistant coach for a little bit. I came in, and then Broxy was having a lot of visa issues, and so was Surenfire, the academy jungler at the time. And then so Team Liquid soon realized they didn't really have a jungler for the time that they were starting scrims, and maybe even by the time of LCS, they weren't sure.
You were going to play as jungler, right?
Yeah, that was the plan.
Real thing. Were you scrimming?
Yeah, that was a real thing. I probably scrimmed for about a month, maybe a few weeks as a jungler, and that was an eye-opening and very fun experience actually. Scrimming as a different role than the one I've played professionally for like 10 years. And yeah, what can I say? It was a really fun time.
How was it going? I'm curious.
Better than expected, I think.
Do you think you would enjoy being a jungler?
Sorry?
Could you enjoy being a jungler if that had become your new role in LCS?
I think so. It's a lot of fun. You definitely have a lot of control over the game. Yeah, when I did well, the team was doing well. If I did bad, we were losing generally. It was just the beginning of scrims though, so all of the teams coming in were like really bad. Usually at the start, a lot of the teams are out of shape and rusty. So maybe that's why I was doing better than expected. Yeah, I was literally just playing like solo queue style. I was just playing like Elise, Rek'Sai, Lee ganking level 3 every game, and it was just working a lot of the time.
You're already all the TSM junglers, so yeah, well done. You have a champion pool, you were ganking. There you go.
Yeah, but eventually Surenfire got here, and then he is actually a jungle main, so he was doing better than me.
Only on Jarvan, though. Anyway, continue. You don't have to respond to these comments.
So I went back to being an assistant coach, but it felt kind of bad being back on the sidelines, especially after like getting a nice little taste of what it was like to be scrimming again, even if it was just as a jungler. And eventually CLG reached out to me after they were having a poor split during Spring Split last year. And I was really excited to just get back on stage, no matter who it was for, no matter who it was with. Just to be back on that stage playing again as a player. And talked with the CLG management, came over, and we closed the deal within like a day or two. And that's how I joined CLG.
You guys obviously had a super rough split last time around. Like you were the worst team in the LCS, but coming into this split, what I was hearing from a lot of the teams that I was talking to was that many people expected CLG to be kind of a dark horse or to pull some upsets off of top teams, that they were much better than last split. So what happened between spring and summer where this massive improvement took place?
I think we started to scrim a lot earlier than a couple of teams. Well, a lot earlier, I guess, meaning by like a week or two. But I think that was pretty instrumental in us laying down kind of the framework for how we wanted the team to be. I think overall, not just from the start of practice for this split, but all the experiences we had last split as well. We really started to come together as a team and act more like a team, play more like a team. When I came in, the team seemed really fragmented almost, and a lot of guys weren't on the same page, but we were able to build that over time. And even though we were losing pretty much all of our matches last split, we were still working on all our issues and growing together as a team.
Do you have any comments on the way that your playstyle has changed, or do you feel like the meta's really affected you in a positive way? Because it feels to me that especially Ruin is performing a lot better on some of these more, I guess, lane dominant top laners like Volibear or Jace that he's been playing. I mean, he always had a very, I would say, overly aggressive style. But is that something that you've worked on either through the champion pool or the meta shift or the way that you guys are actually playing the game to open him up a little bit in that way?
Yeah, I think definitely when I came in, Ruin wasn't talking that much. I think he didn't really know how to communicate that well with the team. So even when he was in a winning position where if we applied pressure to his lane, he could get far more ahead, he didn't know how to communicate that with the team. And then...
Is his English good?
Yeah, his English is pretty good.
Okay.
He's just a little shy, so...
Right, okay.
A little soft-spoken. But I think I really emphasized like how important it was that if he gets ahead, we really need to just like make the game unplayable for their top laner. So that was something we worked on as a team, was if our top is winning, like let's win the game through top. Champion pool wise, I think I've always been flexible. I'm always down to play whatever looks good for our team comp or the way that we want to play. So
a lot of these champions are your champions though, mate. Like Orianna, Syndra, Azir,
TF.
Tilly. Like these are all your champions, mate. Like these are the ones you play in your career, right?
yeah, I guess so. I've been playing for like a while though, so technically every mid champ that's been meta is like kind of my champ. So I feel pretty flexible in that regard.
That's the clickbait Travis headline. Pobelter says every mid champion is my champ. There you go.
But yeah, I think there's kind of two ways of playing the game right now. Is you either go TF Galio or some teleport dog mid laner. You can even go like Karma or something like that, and then you sack your lane a little bit to get your side laners ahead. Maybe let your jungle farm extra camps, farm your wave when you go roaming, or you can either go the greedy scaling route where you're picking Orianna or Azir and you're just playing to eventually outscale the roaming guy. So yeah, it's actually pretty fun right now because I think both playstyles are very viable, and I think teams like C9 are really good at the very aggressive snowballing style where the mid laner is just kind of the dog of the side laners and the jungler. But a team like FlyQuest is pretty much, you know, they just play that mid carry style where the mid is like Azir, Orianna,
Yes.
Corki.
And that style, just to be clear to people, is much more about controlling late game objectives and playing around those by sacking plates and side towers early and trying to force the other team off of split pushing into a late game 5v5.
Yeah, the goal of that is for the mid laner to play really greedy. If the enemy mid roams, just like let your side laners know really well in advance, like, hey, he's gonna have this timing where he can roam to your lane. Please don't die. If you get like one wave extra, maybe farm raptors, maybe get a plate if you can. Play really greedy and get to the point where you're just out pressuring 1v1, because these characters like Galio or TF actually do start to lose 1v1 pretty fairly early in the game, maybe around like the 10 or 15 minute mark. So, and they can be weaker in team fights compared to something like Orianna. So yeah, it's kind of like the goal of that one side is to snowball the early game from the Galio side, and the goal of the Orianna side is to just win, slowly extend your lead by farming harder, and just eventually be the late game carry.
You guys have kind of been going towards both styles, though. Is this something that you feel flexible in? Because you played a game this week where you played up against FlyQuest and you were trying to run that more Galio style, but you did have a fair amount of poke in there, so there was some level, I would say, of objective control as long as you landed the Jace and the Ezreal skill shots. Now, that didn't end up working out for you. FlyQuest took the game. But in your second game, you came back versus 100 Thieves, and you were looking more along the, okay, let's scale, let's team fight. We have, you know, a lot of potential engage here with the Trundle and the Rakan, and you were playing the Orianna. Do you feel that you're stronger in one of these styles than the other one?
I think for now it's pretty even. I don't think there's one of those that it's like, yeah, we should just play this way, where it's like clearly better for us to play this way.
Not like EG,
like, for example,
where it's very clear what they should do.
Yeah, or even like a team like FlyQuest. I think PoE actually can play good prio early champs like Rumble and Kiana. So maybe he could play stuff like Galio or TF if he wanted to, but I think he's just so much better at the other style where they just scale into the late game that for them, there's really not a point. For us, I think it's something we can be flexible about, and I think it's good for us too, because teams won't really know what to expect or how to prepare in that regard.
What do you say about this? So at the moment, your team is tied for second in the rankings. Obviously, we're above what most people would expect. But the problem is, of all the teams that are in your position, everyone's just going to say, yeah, but you've beaten the bad teams and you haven't basically played a bunch of the top teams yet. And in fact, this next week, you've got some big games. You've got like Cloud9, TSM coming up. So would you make the case that, do you think you actually are the second best team? Like, are we going to see it this week?
Are we the second best team? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. To me, it's not that important where we are right now, but where we're going to be by the time playoffs hits, which is still a long time from now. Still going to be a completely different patch.
That does sound like something Weldon writes on a whiteboard. Like, it's not where we are now, it's where we're going to be. Like, you know, that's good. I like that. It's all fortune cookie wisdom. Yeah. I love it. Keep going.
I came up with that one. I mean, we can only play the teams that have been scheduled against us so far.
Exactly. Great. Keep going. I love this. It's great. Right. What's next on the list?
We can only play our next opponent.
I mean, yeah. So let's see. We play C9 TSM next week. I think it's not really as cut and dry as like, oh, these teams are the bottom teams and they suck, and therefore CLG sucks because they only beat these sucky teams. I mean, what happened? Golden Guardians just beat FlyQuest, and 100 Thieves just had a really close game against TSM.
Sure.
So I don't think it's very fair to say like these guys are bottom, these guys are shitter. They're not like the top teams.
I mean, EG got stomped by TSM too. That was not a particularly close game.
That was embarrassing.
Yeah,
it really does feel like there's just
to TSM. I'm gonna just take a lot away from EG because you know how we deal on this show. So.
And I feel like with best of ones, there's so much volatility. You only get to see you really only get to see one game, and you can have a bad game, or the other team can have a great game, or there might just be a pick that one team realizes is really strong and capitalizes on it. Like the very first game of LCS, we got perfect game. People probably thought we are just going to be like total shitters, laughing stocks again.
Yeah.
But that has not been the case so far for us. I think it's really hard actually to generalize just from seeing the two best of ones that a team plays every week.
I would agree with that, definitely, because when I'm watching LPL and LCK at the moment, some of the best teams in the whole leagues over there are having like occasionally like a nightmare game one where they're terrible, and then they just stomp the next two games. Like whatever they figure out in that first game, the next one, like they change the draft and they can't be beaten at that point. So the point is, if that was LCS, we'd only have the best of one, so the whole storyline would be, wow, they're terrible now. Like, what happened to them? Like, people would go way too far the other way, you know.
I honestly believe the biggest victim of this split is Evil Geniuses, because if you look at their game versus Cloud9, and you look at their game versus TSM, and you look at how hard they were destroyed in both of those games, but so much of it was based off of some whack-ass draft that they shouldn't have done, which... Okay, let's talk to their coaching staff about that issue. But I think if you gave them a best of three and they were able to make alterations off of that first game, it would have been a much closer, if not a victory for them in a series.
I'll give you the other example going the other way as well, is Golden Guardians got way too much credit for those like almost wins early on. Because I tell you what, now, all of a sudden those look like, actually on average, everyone was overhyping them. Like now they look like they're borderline to even make playoffs. So I think both. This is the problem with BO1s is like you still have to draw the same conclusions. It's the only information.
I mean, they beat FlyQuest this week.
Information.
It was a horrible game, but they did beat FlyQuest. We were talking earlier, Pobelter, before you joined us, about how the level of gameplay this week in the LCS was pretty tragic overall, especially given some of the games like 100 Thieves versus TSMs that were just complete fiestas. How have you felt watching this split? Because it seems like you guys have obviously progressed a lot, but it seems like many teams have sort of regressed in skill between spring and summer.
I don't ever actually feel like teams or players regress in skill. It's just like everyone is constantly getting better, and if you don't get better, then you fall behind. I guess that's
regressed in relative skill. There you go.
Sure. Yeah.
So
let me think.
There's too much parity between the players. You know, there's not like you were saying before. There's not as clear cut like this team's up here and this team's down here.
Yeah. There were definitely some interesting games, some head scratching plays from what I saw. I'm not sure if that means like the skill level of the league has regressed. To me, I just take it for what it is. It's like, yeah, there were some fucking fiesta games last weekend. But for me, it was really fun to watch. The TSM versus 100 Thieves one, that was a banger. That was really fun to watch.
It was. I do admit that game was ridiculously fun to watch. Even though I kind of hated myself for watching it for every minute of it, I was riveted to it and shouting at my TV screen and jumping up and down in the room. So... But it was because of the sheer number of insane throws in that game was just off the charts from both teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Sometimes when you watch other regions too, there's definitely some baffling things going on from my perspective too, but I think people just like to shit on NA, honestly.
It is fun.
I definitely see some really crazy things too when I watch like some LCK games even, or LPL. Or
we're used to seeing that in LPL. Come on. That's like LPL's entire existence.
Let's spin it the other way then, Pobelter. Let's get creative here. So everyone obviously can praise Cloud9. Who else do you actually think is really good in NA? Like which LCS teams do you think have like quality that you enjoy, or players that are playing well? Who would you pick out as some like highlights if people want to not watch the fiestas and go to the quality matches? Who are the good teams for you right now?
To me, I rate teams by how strong I feel pressured when I play against them. Okay. So yeah, C9's at the top where it feels like if maybe one or two bad things happen, then it's going to be extremely hard to come back already. Like even something as tiny as like, oh, I accidentally recalled a wave late, so they got full control in our jungle. Right. So they're just going to permanently dive pressure bot, and our AD carry is going to be down like 20, 30 CS and lose all his plates. Playing against C9 feels like that. Other teams I feel pressure against, I think EG, but they can be kind of hit or miss sometimes, I guess, because I guess that's just kind of their play style, very feast or famine. FlyQuest as well is pressure in a different sense, where it's like they're just scaling. It's like playing against a wall that is just scaling, and hopefully they don't get to the point where they just outscale you. Am I missing anyone?
That's it. There's only Team Liquid left after that. Like, who else is this good? TSM, Team Liquid, the last, right?
I think Team Liquid is okay, but I don't think I don't feel as much pressure when I play against them, pretty much. I feel like, yeah, I don't know. It's just hard to quantify, I guess. But just as a player, I don't feel extreme pressure when I play against them.
See, here's the problem. When you're saying that, that's just reminded me of something else Monty didn't even bring up. So he brought up, obviously, the FlyQuest and the EG games where they got embarrassed. Mate, Team Liquid did their best to get embarrassed by Dignitas. Like, this is... Monty, everyone had a nightmare game this week. Everyone had a game where they were just like, let's see if I can look as bad as possible without it literally being whole win traded. Like, there we go. And some of these teams at the bottom were just like, again, they were like, no, after you. It's like, and then they just let them win.
I couldn't believe a lot of the games.
Well, actually, though, that's the thing with Pobelter. If I were you and I'm the one sat off watching this, I'd be loving it. It's like, right, maybe we can be the second best. Fuck it. If they're going to do that, maybe it's possible.
Now, I totally agree. I think there is a world, given the kind of parity of results and the way that all the teams have, except for Cloud9, have dropped the ball. It's very difficult to do power rankings. I know we did that last week on this show, talking about the NA power rankings, but I would be much less confident because it just feels like most of the teams can just completely fucking throw in these games. And it's very hard to have a level of faith that they know what they're doing. Now, the wildest thing to me...
Maybe we can talk about that, though. Is there something in the current meta, the way the game's being played, that's making it harder to, like, close out a game cleanly? Would you have any theories on that, Monty? I mean, listen, like, for example, I know on the, like, Dig TL game, wasn't it something like that? Didn't Dig have, like, the better dragons or something? I forget what the detail was, but there's factors that are at play. So do we have any, like, speculations as to what's making it harder to close games out cleanly?
It can be pressure, obviously. Like if you are on Soul Point or something like that, you always have the threat of coming back. So if you have a strong early game but start throwing in the late game, you can at least try and place pressure on certain objectives. It is somewhat of a rubber band mechanic that they've implemented in League of Legends. There's also, I just think draft is so crazy important right now that, and this is where EG got, really messed up versus Cloud9 a couple weeks back, was trying to play that Kassadin into them where it's almost impossible to win if you're playing against a Karma Olaf unless you get some insane early game snowball. But I think what's surprising to me about this entire thing is, so I expect that when I see those kind of drafts like we saw in the EG versus Cloud9 game, when we go back to like the keep it simple, stupid, the KISS comps, which is what I think both 100 Thieves and TSM should be doing right now, because I think they need to stabilize their play style before they start experimenting more. So we see those keep it simple, stupid comps in action when they're playing against each other. You'll notice that they've been prioritizing Azir for Ryoma because he's having better performances on that champion and he can safely farm up. They're trying to make sure that he has some easy pressure in the mid lane, that he's not expected to roam, that he's going to get up into the late game where he's better at team fighting than he is at playing pressure on the map during the laning phase. So this all makes sense, right? And we also see, okay, TSM going back, when they've tried some wacky compositions in the past or more fiddly comps, they haven't been able to execute them properly. So they're going back to basics. I mean, except for the Blitzcrank, there's nothing too weird about the composition that they're using right there. And I do think that Biofrost, I mean, it was feast or famine in terms of his hooks in that game. But regardless, you wouldn't expect them to make, it's like they compensated, instead of making draft mistakes, both of these teams just made every macro mistake possible in the late game. So I don't even know what to think anymore, because I would have agreed with you, but when I saw this draft coming into this game, I thought it would be a much cleaner win for one of these teams, right?
By the way, I'll just say I love Jizuki. Like, not only do I like his playing style because it's just so like he just goes for it all the time, but what I love is this: he understands, right, that you don't if there's a problem and you don't like the way your team's set up, you don't whine on Twitter, you don't like make some sort of interview where you make veiled comments and subtweet your own boss. What you do is this: if your coach doesn't get who you are still as a player, you thought he'd shown him who you are, but he doesn't get it, and he puts you on karma when your whole game is like, I'm a pop off and I'm a carrying the side lane. If he doesn't get that and he puts you on karma, you just tactically int over and over again so that he himself has to go, I don't know if I'll do that again. That might be a bad job if I do that. And then at that point in time, you don't have to have that awkward discussion. He's just going to put you back on the right champion. Then when you carry the game, you walk past the coach and you go, great draft, coach. I really appreciate the way he did that. That's this guy's a professional. I appreciate that. I like a man who lets you know where he's standing, Monty. Because why are you putting Jizuki on karma? What are you thinking? Have you not been watching the games that you were winning? Like, this ain't it, homie. What was that?
I mean, it's not like the coach is just the one who decides everything when it comes to draft. It's not like EG's coach is just like.
I just don't believe Jizuki decided to go on karma, though. I don't believe it. If you put a lie detector on me, mate, I don't believe it. You know.
I think he did. It's never just like the coach tells you to play something and you're like, okay, coach, I'll play it, even though I don't want to. You know, if he didn't want to play Karma, he would have said, hey, I don't think Karma's good here. I really think we should play this instead. And then it should be a back and forth. I mean, that's how it's been on every team with every player I've been on. It's never just like the coach being like, hey, this is what we're playing this week. Deal with it, guys. And then after the game, they lose. And then the fans and the analysts, whoever, blame the draft. And then everyone blames the coach for that. But it's definitely a collaborative process.
I agree.
I think, Monty, I've realised, like, it's all right, mate. Like, the jokes just bounce off him. Just keep going. All right, we'll just...
you were...
He gave us a great answer. Like, listen, I agree with us. Some great insight into how teams work. Listen, the dynamics working out great for us so far. Don't worry. Keep going.
I also think, at least in those situations, sometimes the coaches can pressure you, though, to say, like, oh, we really think you should try this. And then it gets into the player's head, oh, I should try this, right? And so they sort of get brainwashed by the coach over time, thinking that perhaps something, there might be some depth to their style. Because every player wants to think, oh, yeah, I can play anything.
Believe, yeah, exactly.
I can do this for the team.
Some of them want to believe, Monty, that every mid-champion's their champion. So that's just sort of a sentiment a lot of them have. A lot of them not so bold to say it, but, I agree.
But yeah, I think this is definitely not the play for EG. I'm not super impressed by their flexibility, but they honestly do have very good execution when Jizuki can kind of have his way with the game and have his way with the map, as long as he's not playing into some super bad mid-jungle matchups like we saw versus C9. But for the most part, I think EG has found their niche. I think that they're one of the best teams at playing in the league in the way that they run things. So why not keep going that direction? I think they learned a valuable lesson, but it's just kind of a one-off game this week and not too much to be concerned about.
All right, what about this? This is what we normally do, Pobelter. I'll tell you a secret of talk shows. Is if you hit sort of like a dry spell, you see what the other person's interested in talking about. So is there a team, like, we haven't talked about all the teams in the league. Is there a team that you find interesting at the moment or has got some depths that we haven't discussed? Like, there's quite a few squads we haven't talked about. Who are you interested in, mate?
I don't know. Let me see. Who's even in the LCS? Hang on. Let me pull up Leaguepedia.
Obviously, we've got
you played for half of these teams, Pobelter.
Yeah.
Come on.
Let's see. There's Immortals who picked up their first win last week, which I thought was really funny because they.
Did you think that was legit to bring in the academy roster? What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's a legit play. What essentially they did was they literally did the opposite of what the guys in charge thought would be the best thing to do. They literally subbed in the opposite players, and then they won their first game. So that was cool.
Well, you mean the guys who are no longer in charge?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably part of the shift here. But if I'm Immortals, I think this is a good strat. And you know what pisses me off is that everyone is constantly saying, so the fan reaction is always about LCS. Oh man, these teams, they said that franchising was going to allow them to take more risks and do more things. Even if they were able to lose, they wouldn't have been relegated, so we can see more players being developed. So then everybody's bagging on Immortals publicly for saying that they were going to put in their academy roster, which, does have many players that have played in the LCS in the past. But you know what? you guys, Immortals is thrown out this season. It's pretty clear. Like, they're done for 2020. So instead of just sitting there and playing a bunch of players that, you know, they don't really have a lot of faith in, why not just mix it up? Change up the roster every week. You know what I mean? Like, make these shifts and try and figure out who works best with whom for the rest of the season. That way, at least you know who's on your team and who's on your bench. And you know what? Insanity didn't have a bad week this week overall. And I like the way that they drafted. Normally, I wouldn't be down with, let's say, a top lane Malphite, but they made just a very simple draft to execute. It's just a Orianna Malphite wombo combo draft where you can get a lot of room for Apollo to do work on Ezreal. Like, this composition, is it one-dimensional? Sure. Yes, it's one-dimensional. But if you're having a team that isn't perhaps the best or normally LCS level, why not just give them something simple to execute? And you know what? They did it. They did it. What's the problem here?
I'll even throw in there as well. This is actually, of all the academy rosters, one that's a pretty good one to give the garbage. Like, listen, you're not going to make playoffs. You're not going to win worlds. Let's be real. So this is a good squad to test because it's not like you're taking 5 rookies like the Misfits guys did and chucking them in LCS and then being like, what, they failed? Being brought in halfway through a split, because obviously that's unfair as well. In this scenario, all you're really doing is stress testing Alorum and Insanity, because the other 3 players have been in LCS for years. Like, they're like, that's even established bot lane from LCS, and Nick Smithy's played in a billion teams, so it's even his meta right now if you look at the champions. So I actually think this is a pretty good chance. You've got 3 veterans, and then you put the solo lanes around them and you give the solo lanes a chance for the rest of the split. At the end of the split, maybe you pick one of those guys because you need NA residents for next year's team, and you pick whoever else you want. I think it's not even a bad gamble, Monty. It's not like 5 rookies where they can all implode.
I think Insanity already looks better than Aka, so I think you've got that advantage too. But yeah, I just don't understand why the fans would react negatively to this, because this is what we've been saying we want in LCS, is teams to take more of these kind of risks. That's what 100 Thieves is doing right now. You know, 100 Thieves, if any team has committed in the LCS to having a development system, C9 is one of them. 100 Thieves has literally now made their academy team, and then they've made a high school team, 100 Thieves Next, to start to train players at an even younger level. So 100 Thieves should absolutely be one of the teams that's seeing who can go in and out. And you know what? It may not even be about Meteos' play. It may not be about Meteos' attitude. It may be just that 100 Thieves wants to put in, you know, some other players, or they think that contracts and whatever their academy support's name is, maybe they just have better synergy on the map. I don't know what the thinking is behind it.
Here's the mean joke, Monty. Again, you know, the new me, maybe I wouldn't do this, but the old me just says I have to say it anyway. So it's going to be brutal when they put Rioma onto that high school squad, you know. I bet he'll carry, though. I guarantee he's going to dominate. Like, when Golden Gun went down to academy, he's going to style on those kids. You know?
Very good. Very good. I think, though, that this is a good scenario for the LCS, because I think also when Immortals, if you look at them, the day before they played Golden Guardians, they got the ever-loving shit kicked out of them by C9 Academy. And people will look at C9 Academy's record, by the way. Trust me, if you haven't been watching Academy games, which I actually have been watching C9 Academy games because I've been doing shows with C9 with their Academy players, if you actually watch those games, part of it was that, you might not know this, C9 Academy's AD carry King is trapped in Australia right now, so they had to make a last-minute swap of their AD carry. So they didn't have the same synergy that they had when they won Academy last split. So they were starting off a little bit slow. But if you actually watch the games they lost were really, really close, and they are still like probably the best Academy roster overall. So when you consider that, sure, people will say, oh yeah, you know, how good is Academy? They lost to a 3-3 team in Academy. Well, they shouldn't really be 3-3 is my point. But even then, they did lose to an Academy team. But when I talk to the C9 Academy guys, and this could be them bigging themselves up, but they think they would have been 5th or 6th place in the LCS last split. That's their opinion.
I want to get Pobelter's take on this. So obviously, like we've seen, I mean, the best example is obviously Blabber, who now is like looking like the MVP of the league and is one of the best players and hasn't been a starter for that long. You have Tactical on Team Liquids, looks pretty solid. I think Johnson's been one of the revelations of the year, despite how bad his team is. Do you think that there is NA talent? Like, do you think the idea of like writing off all NA talent because there hasn't been that much for the last few years? Are there players in the academy that would be like proper LCS players, not just the worst player?
I am unsure, honestly. When I play solo queue, I'm never really like too surprised by like, oh, this player is actually like really good, and I think he could, if he's not already an academy player, he should be an academy player. Or if I play against an academy player, I'm like, oh, this guy's actually really good, and he could be an LCS player. I don't really feel that way. I think a lot of the times what they actually need is to just get a chance and honestly just get shit on for a little bit, and then maybe they improve a lot from that experience from playing with all the LCS boys.
That's right. Exposure to the bacteria in the fecal matter will make them stronger.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, honestly, when I play in solo queue against them, though, it doesn't really feel that way. I think sometimes what they do need is a chance. Like you said, Insanity came in, and then he actually did fine. Yeah, like you said, when they get the chance, though, a lot of times fans just shit on them. Like, sometimes it's a bust. Sometimes it doesn't work out. What's weird is a lot of the times, I think the fan opinion actually does have a strong effect on the way that the teams are operated. It's really weird. It feels like it just shouldn't matter, Like, if IMT is really sure that this is the way to go, then they should just do it. But it feels like they get heat from the community, and then someone on IMT sees this, and they're like, we should do something about this. The fans are right. And then they, like, fire people. They change things up. I don't know. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they both independently came to the same conclusion that something is wrong. But to me, it always felt like there's some weird sway that the
There's magic narratives have power for sure.
I mean, I have to say,
I won't say the fans were right about them all. Let's be real on that one. Let's not slice the oranges the wrong way.
I'm not entirely convinced that Twitch plays LCS GM would not actually be better than some of the GMs in LCS. So I think we just take that one on a team by team basis. Personally.
Obviously, for TSM it would be terrible, but I would love to see it. All I'm saying, Reggie, is fuck it up, bro. If you really believe in those fans and Bear Life, fuck it, Bear Life, right? So I'm just saying, let's try it. Let's go for that. No, by the way, one thing I want to say, Monty, because you'd appreciate this. You like that style where people should come up with characters if they want to stream and do things. Why has no one thought of that? If you're going to say how terrible solo queue in NA is, do a plague doctor little role play. That sounds sick with that little beak, come in all the religious paraphernalia and theme that you could use about, pestilence. Could be awesome.
Let's just say I had a lot of skit ideas about LCS this past weekend that we will execute on whenever this pandemic ends and we can actually do it.
Yes.
It should be fun. So
I don't even think solo queue is that bad, though. When you get in a game with a lot of academy and pro players, it actually feels fine. And then there's like strong solo queue players. It doesn't feel that bad, but the issue is there's usually like one or two of those games going on, and then you'll just get trapped in like a low Grandmaster or Masters game, and those are the games that feel like just soul crushing to play. But for the most part, it feels fine queuing up when a lot of pros are playing. Like, usually if there's just some really good pro player that always does well in solo queue, the game usually feels fine. It feels productive. Like, usually when I play against Sven, Vulcan, Duo, or whatever, the games feel usually fine.
What do you think about the idea? So LS floated, I think, a good idea on Twitter, which is having some sort... I know this adds more to your schedule and is a giant pain in the ass in the same way that the Kespa Cup is. And in the same way, by the way, guys, for everybody who is so hyped up on the whole, like, NA Kespa Cup idea, let's be very clear. Most of the LCK teams go into Kespa Cup with absolutely zero practice because it's their off season or they've just formed new rosters. So it really isn't an amazing demonstration
Here's
of
a stat for you, Monty.
Team skills.
I believe, I'd have to go back and check. Maybe there was 1 year I'm wrong, but I'm almost certain whoever won the Kespa Cup never won a split that year.
Yeah, I think that's
ever
probably accurate.
I don't think it ever happened. Which is it all, right?
Because here's why, guys. If you think about it, the top LCK teams who go to Worlds are practicing through the beginning of November, and then Kespa Cup happens in November or December. So these teams are on break. The best teams in Korea are on break when this happens. So don't expect it to be some incredible showcase of amateur skill. But he did bring up the fact that NA might be able to do something like that with top academy teams during the off season. Do you think that would be remotely helpful in your way that you think a lot of these academy players kind of have to get shit on the big stage in order to improve?
Yeah, and maybe it's not even getting shit on. Maybe they show up and they play like, okay. No one's probably going to be amazing right out of the bat. That would be pretty remarkable, I think. But yeah, I think a lot of guys just need the chance, I guess, but it's so hard to give that chance where it's like a best of one. If you start the season 0-4, you're kind of just like fucked. Anyway, back to the main point. Yeah, I think it's fine. More tournaments is better, I think. I guess it's kind of cool to have something that where there's nothing on the line. Of course, I don't know how this would actually work in reality. Like maybe my team goes to Worlds and then I finally get back and I want to have a little break or a little vacation time before
You could
the next
exclude
play
world teams.
Uh-huh.
There's no, like, we're making up a format here. We don't have to do it. The Kespa Cup does. We could easily say if you're an NA team that makes the World Championship, then you're on break during that time, and it's only a tournament for the teams who didn't make Worlds who could take a break during Worlds instead. We can make that up, sure. We can do whatever we want in our theoretical universe, Pobelter.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely, if I was like an academy player trying to get in, trying to get my name out there and trying to get a chance to play in LCS, I would love that chance. If I was an LCS player, maybe not as much. It would just be like, why do I have to play this meaningless tournament where I'd rather be having more off-season time? But maybe not.
It's called competing for your job. That's why you want to. That's why you want to play in it. You're motivated to play in it because you're actually fighting for your slots. Because if you think about it, it's kind of in the best interest of teams who didn't make Worlds who actually want to improve themselves. First off, they have a reason to keep scrimming and keep improving as a team with their current players. Second off, they have a chance through this competition to evaluate new players during an open signing period, because I believe the signing window, mid-November, right? After Worlds starts? Or after Worlds ends, excuse me. Most contracts, I believe, end in mid-November. So it seems to me that it's a chance for you to kind of figure out what your roster is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, why not? Seems like a fine idea.
So I don't know. I think it was an interesting concept that would be worth exploring a little bit more and offer more kinds of off-season content, personally. Especially for teams that, are getting paid. Because the crazy thing about League of Legends is that 75% of players get paid the same amount of money to play, 6 months out of the year, as other players have to play 9 months out of the year when they go to Worlds and MSI and potentially even All-Stars. So it's not like everybody's
that is
playing.
Weird if you think about how a lot of contracts are structured.
Yes, it's super weird.
The whole point is making playoffs gets you a bomb. The playoff games get you money. If you win like a home playoff game, you get a big bonus. Like the whole thing of the structure is they all have all the incentives built in. Like that's why I actually feel like the sad thing about esports is we skipped like the middle phase where you monetize and go up, and we just went straight to the phase where we rammed all the investment through and gave everyone fucking guaranteed money for a load of stuff where they haven't even we didn't even have the 80s and the 90s in basketball. We just came straight to now, where you come out of the high school and you have all the money and you just a boss, where you get like $80 million or whatever.
If you think about this,
or 50 Johnny Manziels in LCS right now, get him out. Just get him out right now.
I'm not calling you out, Pobelter, in particular, but you didn't make playoffs in Spring Split. Now, FlyQuest played more games in playoffs than they played in total in the entire Spring Split. So they played more than twice the number of games that you did. But those guys, maybe they did get a bonus. We don't know. But I do think it's weird in League of Legends that you can play, especially in LCS and LEC, you can play more games in playoffs than you do in the regular season. And the teams that are in playoffs can also go to MSI and to Worlds, and they're still getting paid at a flat rate. That seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought about the pay structure of that, but more so just how ridiculous it is that we play 18 games in the regular season. And
it is ridiculous.
Play more than that. I just miss best of threes, man. Bring back best of threes.
I've got a question for you, Pobelter. What would you say the main reason you still play professionally is? Do you still have dreams of winning championships? Worlds? Is that still like a big deal for you?
Yeah, I wouldn't be a pro player right now if I didn't think I could do better than I have before. So I don't know, what's my goal right now? I guess make it to Worlds and have a good showing at Worlds. If I didn't think I could do that, then I wouldn't be a pro right now. I would just quit, I'd retire, go be a coach, go back to school, something like that. I think I can do it, so that's why I'm doing it, and I still have fun doing it. I have fun showing up to scrims every day, scrimming, working with my team, helping my teammates improve, them helping me improve. I still really enjoy the process. And it's been 10 years at this point, so I guess I'm not really getting tired of it anytime soon. That's
lifer, League of Legends lifer.
I guess so.
Why not? He keeps on making it, whether he's a coach or a player. All right, we do have to let you go because I know you have to do scrims today, Pobelter. So thank you for joining us. We're going to take a little break. We're going to get Jesiz from SK Gaming and talk about all the changes that have been made over there when we return in a couple minutes. We are back now with Jesiz from SK Gaming to discuss their wonderful start to this split after making significant roster changes and coaching changes during this offseason. They've been fantastically successful so far. They have given what I consider the only legitimate victory, or loss, I should say, to G2. And the reason why I say that is because I don't really count G2's losses in the first week of competition, in which Perkz was changing roles and suffered a devastating personal tragedy, and G2 isn't scrimming, to be legitimate wins over G2. But you actually did have that was a great game you guys played this week versus G2. I think it was really interesting.
Be careful, Monty. There was another American analyst attempted to say which G2 wins count and don't count. It didn't go well for him, I'm just saying. Just be careful with that one.
Okay.
It's tricky areas. Dance around that one. Dance around that one.
I think that this was a much stronger version of G2 that you played when they were actually practiced up, when they were more comfortable with the meta. And I think you guys played I think both teams played a really good game where you guys were playing very well to each of your win conditions. You guys, in spite of having, recently even swapped players, putting Genax in the top lane, looked really comfortable in terms of your win conditions and how you were going to force that game out. Nobody got kind of sucked into the side lanes against what was a split pushing comp from G2. You guys really stuck to fighting around those objectives. It was just a really interesting game to watch in terms of a battle of styles and a battle of draft strategies between the two teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a bit in the favor of lesser teams per se, because I think that G2 do excel from having a meta where like you have to play around the map and stuff like that, and a meta where it requires you to be very creative, right? But right now it's very much about the neutral objectives, right? Like Dragon and Herald and stuff, and just having the better team comp. Like lane phase is not as relevant. Like it's still very relevant, right? But it's way more about having a well-rounded comp and like grouping and you're just being on the same page. And I mean, draft is very important as well, right? So I think we definitely met a weaker G2. Also because they were trolling in draft right against us, but
the Kayle was a bit weird. What did you think about that when you saw it come up? Because they kind of blind picked it into you guys.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think that they just really want to make sure that they get good solo lanes. But it was really weird because the first three, I think they went Kalista, Rek'Sai, something else. And that was a very, very early game, right? Like they're straight up blind picking Rek'Sai, for example. So they're very early centric, right? And then they were very much forcing late game in their comp on their 4-5, and those late game picks just made no sense at all, as blind picks especially, since both Akali and Kassadin weren't outscaling our champions, since they couldn't even teamfight against our champions or split push against our champions, right? Late game, so they weren't even late game insurance, and so the draft just made no sense.
It's not like there was a heavy pinch on the jungle pool either, considering that Trundle, Sett, and Volibear were banned, but there were still quite a few available jungle options for them to roll with. I had a specific question about this game. What do you think about the call when you guys went to go get Baron with 30 seconds until the Ocean Soul was coming up? Do you wish you would have delayed that, or do you see that as a mistake in the gameplay because you traded off the Ocean Soul for another few minutes as a result of that?
I mean, in general, I just make sure that my guys, it's not so much about making sure that you get the last dragon or that you necessarily get the Herald or even Baron. That it's the most important thing is that you're either there in time or the setup is right. So if the setup is not right, or there's, for example, 30 seconds to either one dragon or Baron or whatever it might be, right? That you're just committing to something and that you're there first and that you know how you want to play out the fight, right? So for example, even if, let's say, it's our 4th dragon coming up, right? And maybe enemies at the dragon first, there's no reason to take a bad fight, right? Even if it is our last dragon, then it's much better to just give it and then just get tempo on the map and get the next one, right, by playing properly beforehand. So I mean, you could make arguments for us going for the last dragon, right? But in the end, it's a decision. We just make a decision, right? And then hopefully we should get a bigger lead from getting the Baron, right? And then we should get the next dragon because of that Baron, right? So in the end, I don't think it matters too much.
So what happened during the off season with SK? Because you guys made a lot of surprising moves, I would say. You and Unlimited swapped roles from head coach to assistant coach. You made some roster changes, bringing in Zazie. You were kind of swapping some players around from your academy roster. You role swapped Genax to mid from top. What happened to make all of these decisions?
I mean, I wasn't a part of that process. I was one of the guys that got added, so I can't really answer that.
I've got a question for you. I noticed that the guy who was your assistant coach was the coach of Zazie when he was in Big last year. So is that part of why the decision to bring Zazie in has come? Because obviously, I don't think it was that Genax himself wanted to swap. It's more like that was the option he had when you bring a different mid in. Isn't that something a lot more reasonable?
I don't think Genax swapped because of the option of Zazie. I think he just swapped because it really fit him and it was really something he wanted to do. And I mean, I think just in general, it fit his strengths really well, right? Because of like what champions he plays and what he prefers to play, right? And how he is as a player, strength-wise. So I don't think it was definitely not because of Zazie. And I don't think that SK necessarily got Zazie because of Kanani's previous relationship. I think that was just like a relation with Zazie, right? I think it was just more that Zazie was a known talent in the scene for a while now. And I mean, as you can see, like he's a very, very talented player, right? And everyone in Europe knows that and has known that for a while now, right? Even before they won EU Masters as well.
What do you think about the general level of talent in EU Masters? Because it seems like we've gotten so many like up and coming players who have been almost, I would say, instantly LEC level so far during this year, and especially with the rise of Mad Lions and now with you guys doing so much in terms of having great performances on SK Gaming, and with G2 and Fnatic, who have been the kings of Europe, one or the other forever now, it seems like there's potentially a legitimate shot of a new champion this split for the first time in a very long time.
I mean, I think the game just changed a lot. I don't necessarily think it's so much the game, actually. I think it's just rather that the level of play increased so much and the standard increased very much. And even like if you watch the top of solo queue in Europe, for example, or I imagine Korea as well, right? Solo queue players have very good individual macro understanding, or just macro understanding in general, right? So you don't need those veterans anymore that will shot call everything and needs to know everything because everyone like that level is already there, right? So a lot of it is just mechanical skill and game sense and stuff like that. That solo queue, like good solo queue players, will either be able to do as good as you or even better, right? So I think the game has just gotten to a place where it's better to just have the crazy talent because they're just there and will be better or can be better.
Do you think
I've got a question for you? Why has SK had some of your wins over the big teams people wouldn't have expected you to, but then also some of your losses have been to the teams that if you're going to be a top team, you should be beating, the XLs of the world, the Vitality. So what would you say about like the general up and down of SK so far?
I didn't really think too much about the fact that we won against the good teams and lost against like the bad teams, right? I think actually the supposedly worst teams are better, or like we're at least putting up a way better showing, both in draft and gameplay against us. So I don't think there's like anything mental there or like anything like that. I think we just lost the games because we either had drafts that we weren't super comfortable with, or the guys just weren't playing up to the level ultimately, and our opponents were just playing better than us. And I don't think it mattered too much who we faced, honestly.
By the way, just in case people don't know, like I'm guessing, are those like those special glasses that filter out like the blue light or whatever the hell it is? Like,
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, listen, fair play to you being so bold to wear such a fabulous eyeliner color. You know, like, listen, I'm just glad that you're confident in yourself. Be yourself, King. Be yourself.
Yeah. When it comes to SK, you guys have dropped a few games to teams like XL and Vitality that we really expect you to be better than. And part of what's exciting about LEC right now is that it does appear like all of the teams have become more competitive. Obviously, after having pretty poor last splits, Vitality and XL do look substantially better, and like they can compete with the top teams. But how do you feel that LEC is really shaking up in terms of the power rankings right now? Because I agree with some of the casters, what the casters were saying, where this feels like a very close, very high level league at the moment. And that there is, the field is more or less wide open.
So what was the question?
Do you think that like the whole LEC is wide open? Forget just even the top spot. Like basically everyone except Schalke looks like they can win games. I mean, even XL, who people were dissing, they've won against you. They've won a couple of it feels like we've never seen this level of competition in LEC before. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the level definitely increased. But it's also hard to say, right? Because on one hand, I feel like the level should, even from early weeks in the more competitive split, which is summer split, right? The level should already be at peak performance to a certain degree, right? But at the same time, I feel like it's also just come to a point where like bottom tier teams just understand what it takes to push through that barrier of being a bottom tier team, like compared to back in the day. Because I think back in the day it was just like bottom tier teams, like for example Mysterious Monkeys or like other teams that I can't name, right? Like they were just, there was no world where they could ever reach the top, right? But I think nowadays people kind of understand, like maybe online also has a factor in it, like the fact that we're playing online, right? But I do think still that there will come a time where all teams will hit like a barrier, and that's also going to be a week break soon, right? After week 4. So there will definitely come a time where people will face problems, and I think the better teams will be able to deal with them better. And then we will actually be able to see the difference, right? And we will see the teams that don't deserve to go to playoffs fall to the bottom,
Sure.
right?
You know, Monty, when there was this news that came out like a day or two ago where Perks basically said he's having to take this week off because obviously he's dealing with issues, etc. Like, if you look at it, right, the worst thing about it is, right, G2 this week plays Misfits and XL. So listen, you can go either way on this one. Either, actually, those are teams where maybe it's possible you can somehow still get a win, even if you don't have the real lineup. I would go the other way, though. Those are also games, especially the XL one, you're supposed to win if you're G2.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really dangerous point in the split for them because they already were losing games. There was already a lot of teams looked like they could steal games off them. Like, personally, I already felt like with this G2 lineup, they were heading towards like the old Fnatic playoff runs where you'd come in as like maybe like 3rd seed or OG, like you'd be like 3rd or 4th seed. But then the idea is you hope the veterans in the playoffs just win the championship anyway. Like, they're already on the danger of that. So if they do a 0-2 week here, this could be a really, really bizarre end to the split. Because remember, in the modern day, there aren't no circuit points anymore. You got to actually perform in this split if you want to make worlds. There might not be a worlds, but you know what I mean? If we imagine there is still. So this feels like a really dangerous week for G2.
Aren't the championship points still there for LEC? They weren't removed in that.
Am I mistaken on that?
Yeah. So.
Oh, there are championship points. You could be right then, yeah.
Yeah, so they didn't remove that in the LEC, so it is...
Right, I'm mistaken because it's LCS they took it away from,
yeah,
right.
However...
Yes, you're right. Yes, you do have some points, yeah, true. They have got first place from before then, right?
Yeah, however, the equivalent of first place in spring, the way the points are weighted is actually less than it is between 3rd and 2nd place. So in summer, you get 100 points for 2nd place and 140 for first.
It's minimum gauntlet though, yeah, exactly.
In spring, you only get 90 points for first. So it's actually worse than getting 2nd place in summer to win in spring. So it's not that there isn't any risk. And I guess, there's nothing you can do in this situation. Obviously, Perks has gone through some serious...
Not blaming anyone, yeah. I'm just saying they're in trouble though, yeah.
Yeah, and I think probably G2 is still confident that they're going to be able to make top 6 and then just make a deep playoff run because they're G2. Yeah. So I think
it's not a very good playoff format, to be fair. It's double a limb. You could do it. It's not impossible.
And also, if you look at the way the schedule is working out, there's 2 arguments you could make here, Thorin, and I guess we're going to see which one the right one is, which is you take this week off because you're playing up against XL and Misfits, like you're saying, but the next week they're playing Mad Lions and Origin, which is, I think, on paper at this point in time, a harder week to have. So you're saying, okay, well, we might want Perks in for those matches because they're going to be our harder opponents. But if you go 0-2 this week and then you have these harder opponents, and even with Perks you go 0-2 then you're in real shit, right? Whereas if you had Perks this week, you'd have a better chance to go 2-0 and then lose him and just say, okay, we're giving up to Mad Lions and Origin and go 0-2. I think it's a hard call to make strategically.
I think that would have made more sense to me, especially because you get the week off, like you were saying. So what I would say is this: I would actually ask Jesiz a question. What do you think of where OG is at the moment? Because they've had one of the weirdest splits on paper. Because like if you told them, oh, by the way, you beat Fnatic and G2 in your first 2 games, they'd be like, shit, are we top of the league? It's like, nah, still like third, still barely above 50%. So you guys beat them. What do you think of current OG? What are they good at? What are their problems?
I mean, I think the current meta fits them super well. I mean, it basically just everything they want to do, right? Like in general, they don't love playing around the map. They just like really love grouping around objectives, right? And they love playing very methodically. So I think the meta just suits them super well. And yeah, I think they're a good team as well. They have very good individuals as well. I do think that the first week, or at least the when we played against them, a lot of them were underperforming. I also think that the draft wasn't that great for them as well. But I think mostly just they were very much underperforming, and especially Nuke Duck, who just picked it up like crazy, I think, over the couple of weeks.
Fair enough. Thoughts, Monty? What do you think of OG right now?
If you
ever do, if you're forced to.
This is still like my least favorite team, I think, to watch overall in the LEC relative to their strength, or their perceived strength, I should say. I am not in love with this team by any stretch of the imagination. I feel like
what's it like? That's what I don't get. I don't get whether the hype even comes.
I just find they're boring. Team. Like my problem with them is that I just get bored by them, and I don't like. I found their game against Mad Lions this week to be really underwhelming overall. I'm not a big fan of the Kayle craze that's sweeping LEC right now. I don't think that it's offering much to a lot of the teams that are playing it. I think it's a relic of last year, when teams were actually able to do really good things with it around the World Championship and in the lead up to that. But I think the perceived strength of Kayle is like way off at the moment. So I'm not a fan of that. I just find them so bland.
What do you think? What do you think about this Kayle pick?
I mean, what was it against? What did they pick Kayle against?
What do you think about people using Kayle in, like, what was the matchup that they used it in, Monty? This is the Mad Lions game, right?
Yeah, the Mad Lions game. They were playing into the Mordekaiser from Orome. Okay. And they were the weird thing about this to me is like, okay, I get what you're trying to do. You can set up a very strong split push in the late game, because if you're playing Twisted Fate and Kayle, you're basically all-inning on the fact that Kayle is going to be able to 1v1 people and apply a ton of pressure late. But it's a really... I don't like one-dimensional picks for the most part, and I feel like Kayle is really one-dimensional at the moment, especially with the amount of poke comps that are going on, and the fact that you can kind of choose around objectives in 5v5 fights that never really engage the Kayle at this point.
I think Kayle is actually a little bit weird to me, because a lot of it is very much team fighting, right? And I feel like even when teams pick Kayle, like even in LPL or LEC or wherever, most of the time Kayle just team fights, right? Like even before 16 as well, Kayle just doesn't really want to do much inside. She just wants to push one side and then she just groups. And I think in general that's where she finds the most success. And then it really shows also like what she's paired up with, right? Because if she doesn't have someone that can like go in and create space for her, she just looks so useless. And especially because there's so many champions that are actually good against her, right? Like Orianna, Azir, like all these zone controlled mages, just super tougher to team fight against. And yeah, I mean, split pushing isn't the greatest thing right now. Like it's not like you don't gain that much from split pushing, I feel, compared to like, you know, just having like 1v1 pry on side and then being able to group with man advantage. You gain so much more from that, right? In general. So Kayle is just a little bit of a weird pick, and I think it very much requires you to have the right tools around her, or just have it be LPL where everyone's just going in.
Yes, I agree. But I just, it hasn't been my favorite pick, and that's like one of those very, I think, LEC centric picks right now that keeps on coming back in the same way that it was last year too. I mean, it was a very LEC pick last year when you compare it to LCS, and it isn't. I love a lot of the things that LEC is doing right now, especially with a lot of these support picks and, you know, the way that we're seeing significant innovation around that role and a lot of the flexing of picks. But for me, Kayle is just really static and really one-dimensional and really easy to read and play around. But
I've got a stat for you I want to ask you about. So if you look right at the stats for champions in LEC, this split, the most played champion by 3 games is Aphelios, right? It's played in tons of matches. But I looked up, right? If you ask someone who's the best AD carry in LEC, people will probably say Kazi, right? He's actually never won a game of Aphelios in his career, 0-6.
really?
Any thoughts on that? It's interesting, right? It's the most played champion. He's a monster. To be fair, but you know, I wonder why. Do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I think in general, Mad Lions, I mean, they're very good at team fighting, right? And Aphelios is a very good team fighting champion. But you do have to play very much like front to back, right, with Aphelios, and you do have to play around your Aphelios. Whereas I feel like the strength of Mad Lions comes from, I mean, early game, first of all, Kazi just being low econ and being able to move him around the map really well and just basically excel his team and to allow his team to do Mad Lions things as soon as possible, right? And especially for team fights as well, they just play like they thrive when they don't have to play really slow or too much like front to back, right? So I think in general for them it just doesn't maybe doesn't fit as well for them. Yeah, I think that's it. I think Aphelios as a champion is just incredibly noob friendly. I think it's beating a lot of bad teams, and I think right now in the league, like no one really plays super well into Aphelios, especially like I mean the way like supposed to be played into, right? Like you're supposed to play with range and play slow and not allow him to, for example, early game like accelerate through taking plates, like stuff like that, right? But teams are just not playing too smart into Aphelios, and so it's just grabbing a lot of wins from just stupidity from opponents, right? And what I mentioned with like noob friendly is that it is so easy. Like even if you get out macroed, like you legit just like enemies swapping with tempo or whatever, and they get to do Herald and they're hitting tower first. Well, who cares? Aphelios just pushes tower and one shots the tower without Herald and just gets 1,000 plates on his own, and it's really, really crazy.
I don't know. I think there are a lot of problems with Aphelios as a champion, and I have never been of the opinion that a champion should actually just straight up be removed from League of Legends. And a lot of people say Yuumi. But
Yuumi.
Yeah, sure. At the professional level, I agree. And people were confused when I tweeted out that I think Aphelios needs to be removed. They're like, no, remove Yuumi. I do think from a professional perspective that Yuumi is more annoying. But I think from every level of League of Legends play that Aphelios is far more annoying than Yuumi.
Oh, of course.
Because with Yuumi, I do think a lot of the professional players and coaches that responded to my tweet a few weeks back were right in saying that it does warp the way that you draft the game. It warps the way that you play the game. It's incredibly annoying when you're super well coordinated. My problem with Aphelios is that he doesn't seem to have a lot of downsides in terms of strength. Like, he can be placed in virtually any comp. He is the Swiss Army knife of AD carries because he's good in practically every single situation. And my other problem with him, that's my problem with him at the professional level, is I find him boring. I find him boring to watch because he doesn't really have any defined strengths or weaknesses. He just sort of exists and does a bunch of damage. Whereas every other AD carry at least has something to talk about. But Aphelios is just too good, too all-round. My problem with him from a viewership and casual perspective is that he doesn't make sense to watch or to play against, even at a basic silver level, because you don't know what he does, because he has these layers of abstraction. By the virtue of his aesthetic design, they made all his weapons like sci-fi weapons, so I have nothing to relate to what he's doing. Like, as a person who exists in the world, I can look at, Misfortune and understand kind of what she does by her weaponry. Like, Aphelios, because...
And the theme and everything.
Yeah, and his theme. Yeah. I don't even know what the fuck his theme is. it's just
Yeah, he's like a season 30 champion.
As far as I can tell, Aphelios is just some sort of like idiot who watches too much anime. Just like you know the villain in every anime where you think you've killed him and they're just like one speck of blood. Like now I will show you my true form. It's like, oh, that wasn't his true form. But I mean, the last 30. Well, it's true form, Vegeta, or whatever.
But
that's what it feels like.
But if you think about it, if you look at Caitlyn and you look at her sniper rifle, I'm like, okay, by looking at this, I have a vague idea of what she does as a champion.
Yeah.
I look at all of Aphelios's like wacky sci-fi guns, and I'm like, I have no frame of reference to understand what a chakram is and why there are a bunch of things spinning around him.
Yeah.
Or when I look at him visually, if I would just came into this game and you saw Aphelios and he's like pulling out like his weird gravity gun and then this like sniper rifle that doesn't really look like a sniper rifle, it just sort of looks like some alien artifact, and then he's got all these things spinning around him, like just from a pure clarity of design perspective, he makes no goddamn sense. So that's what I talk about when I'm like, delete this champion, because the burden of knowledge to even understand what he does is so ridiculous at every level of play. And then you have the fact that he just doesn't seem to have any downsides, and he doesn't, I don't even know what's happening a lot of the time because his ultimate is just so ridiculous. He just comes in, presses R, and just wins a game. I just hate this champion. At least with Yuumi, I know what Yumi's doing logically when she's jumping around from hero or from champion to champion, right? She has a clarity of visual design that actually makes sense. But Aphelios is just...
She's just support Teemo. Yeah, it's not that you don't know what she's doing. It's just annoying.
It's just super annoying.
Exist in the game. Yeah.
I mean, it's really frustrating to play against Yuumi though. Like
yes, it is.
Like someone who actually plays, it's like I don't even know. Like you actually have to just like it's like playing versus 4 people, but one person is just really overpowered, and then another person's overpowered, and then another person's overpowered. Like she can just jump everywhere, and then she jumps out, and then there's another champion. It makes no sense. The champion's just that's the only champion I think should actually go.
Yes, I think that, well, from a professional perspective, Yuumi is incredibly irritating because having untargetable champions is antithetical to the way that you can strategically play a game. And the fact that you're going to hit, she has a skill shot, technically, but the way you're going to hit that every
if they home in on you, they're not skill shots if they just go towards your champion and go into the champion. She just has like a spooky ghost ability, for fuck's sake. Like, this is stupid, isn't it? So here's my point. Like, speaking of things that are annoying, perfect segue here. Fnatic fans. Well, congrats, Fnatic fans. Your team has a losing record this split. What do you think, Jesiz, of where Fnatic's at as a team? Because this is another squad where we can make excuses for G2. They've got the weird situation with Perks, have done the role swap. Fnatic's kept the same team. They were one of the best lineups in the spring. Everyone had them poised to win the championship. What do you think's gone wrong with this team? Where are they at? Because it's looking bad.
I think that team is really odd to me. I mean, even just from a viewer's standpoint, before I was in LEC, right, like throughout my academy time, I was really confused because I didn't really know what their identity was. Because a lot of the times I see, I mean, like either it just works out, right, like where Hylissang is like the biggest Smurf in history, and he's just like creating all this plays by himself, and everything's working out, right? But then he also just looks like the oddball in that team, where like he's like the identity maker, and then if the game isn't going perfect, then he just looks like completely out of like the world with that team, because like at least Nemesis is very reserved as a player, and I think Reckless is also relatively reserved. I think Bwipo more like, I mean, he can be more of everything, right? But in general, like that team just looks very weird to me. Like I don't know what their identity is. I don't know what they do. I don't know what their strengths are, or what their weaknesses are.
Here's the analogy I'll give you. It's like Fnatic secretly is OG, but then someone put like a Chinese jungler and support on the team, and then they're just like, right, we're dragging these motherfuckers into fights no matter what. It's like, almost feels like Alex. It's like I agree. It's like two different. They're trying to both pull apart at the same time, and you're right. If it works, it looks sick. Like it looks like, what a great. But in fact, that's the funny thing. When it works, you think whoever made this team's a genius. Like to pair Hylissang with Reckless seems perfect, and then self-made with Nemesis. Like this is great. But I agree with you. When it doesn't work, it looks really bad.
Yeah, I think that's a very old school way of also creating a team. Like the fact that you need to mix and match like either like different personality or like different play styles. Like this guy's like a little bit more reserved, and this guy's very aggressive. We need to like pair them together. I think that should have gone out the window maybe season 8 maybe. Like when the Chinese teams came in and they rocked the world of esports, right? I think that idea should just get completely went out of the window, right? Because
if you look in most regions,
pure aggression,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, in most regions, the best teams have one style, right? And everyone's on the same page, basically, right?
For sure. And I think also, like, on the topic of Origin, right? I think what's always been a little bit weird to me as well is, I think Nukeduck in the past, at least like way in the past, right? Like, because I've played against him for a long time back in the past, and I always saw him as a very creative player, and he could play, like, I mean, he still plays a lot of champions, right? But I feel like nowadays, like, he's just chilling and doing his job, and yeah, I mean, I guess that's fine, but it's just weird to me that a player like him is not like the guy that you're scared of when you face Origin. Like, he's not the question mark, like, oh no, like he might carry this game with X champion. Like, it's like, okay, he plays a lot of champions, but he will always do the same thing pretty much. And I think Xerxes kind of gave me the same feeling before Origin as well, that he was actually the question mark on, was it Splice he was on? Like, but I feel like these two players now with Origin are just not question marks to me at all, and they're just Origin.
I think the Fnatic issue is really interesting because I was super surprised at, it wasn't the game I was looking forward to the most this week. That was the Mad Lions Rogue one I was much more curious about, which I was also disappointed by, but for different reasons. The G2 Fnatic game that was so hyped up coming into this week, I mean, I just don't even know what was going on.
What a dumpster fire.
This game,
garbage.
so it was garbage because, first off, I think G2 had a very weak draft here, and I think that all we had to see Fnatic do was play for the late game and play around objectives. And as long as G2 doesn't get some kind of massive snowball going on in the early game, then they're fine. And I'm sitting here watching this game, and when you're playing the Galio into the Twisted Fate, your job is to follow TF so he can't actually dive turrets. So if TF is off ulting somewhere, what you want to do is use the Galio ult to ult to your teammates, try and play back, try and play under turret. And you know what? That's what actually happened in the early game. But then they go onto this stupid chase. So Nemesis actually prevents a dive under the bot lane turret. And then they chase them all the way back under lane and end up losing that fight. And you don't understand that your job is already done when you have prevented your teammates from dying because you are the one who's trying to play for that late game scaling. You've got so much protection for your Aphelios and Graves carries with the Tahm Kench. You're going to be outscaling them with the Ornn items, right? You have such an amazing ability to kind of get into an objective, plant yourself there, and then force the team that G2 is running to play into you. And all of these champions, dude, like that TF, that Pantheon, they're going to get blown up in late game if they try and explode or like basically just try and start the fight. If they try and engage into you, they're just dead. So their only hope is going to be trying to split push with a TF or something wild like that. And yeah, it's going to be hard if that Mordekaiser gets fed, and you can't really play to the top side as effectively because the Mordekaiser will just take Bwipo out with his ultimate, and it's going to be a lot harder to stop that Mord from getting fed. But overall, man, like, I just don't even know what Fnatic's doing because they draft this composition. It is not difficult to execute as long as you can survive this early game, and you have tools to protect yourself in the early game. The Galio does that for you. The Tahm Kench does that for you. You just can't take every fight. And they took every fight, and they get snowballed on, and they lose. So I was really, really disappointed in this game overall.
Any thoughts, Jesiz?
That was the game where G2 first picked TF, right?
Did they first pick it? I will check for you.
I mean, because I haven't watched the game yet, but I remember looking at the draft while I was on the train, and then I just saw first pick TF, like, on the Reddit thread. Like, it's a TF and then 1, right? So I was really curious. And I think
it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and Fnatic banned Graves third after Cinder of Ours, right?
No, they picked Graves.
Oh, really?
They picked Graves in the last rotation.
It was just really weird to me, like, because I saw they lost really hard, right? And
yes,
it was really weird to me why, like, because they were red side against G2, why they didn't just copy paste our bans against G2, because we really exposed them. Like, we banned Var, Syndra, TF.
Yep.
Because TF is like, he can just blind it, right? And then, like, it doesn't matter if he gets prior. Caps can just do Cap things. You can just TP like either pre-6 or you can just after 6 TP, right? So we just banned TF, and then like we just banned out like all the mids like after we pick Azir, right? And it was almost like Fnatic just wanted to give them TF and then play into it and have Nemesis. He was playing Galio, right? Like have Nemesis play Caps like into Caps, or like play to Cap strength, and that was really really weird because that's not like Nemesis. And why make it hard on yourselves when you literally got handed the winning strategy or the winning formula to beating G2? Like it is confusing to me, very confusing to me.
I guess I disagree with you a little bit because I feel like they were kind of baited into the TF first pick, and the fact that their first rotation from Fnatic was Aphelios Galio, I think is perfectly fine. I think that if they had played
on
the
paper,
Galio, if you had played the Galio properly, so I see it more as Fnatic had a plan. I think their coaches did a good job of doing this draft. I think they baited them into the TF pick. I think they had the answers. If your first 3 picks are going to be Aphelios Galio, Tom Kench versus Twisted Fate, my mind, you're doing all right, right? So. I think that they had a fine draft. It's just the execution was so horrendous from Fnatic in this game. It's like the coaches were like, do this thing, and then the players just completely screwed it up in the game.
I've got a fun stat here. Fun being asterisk, depending on who you're a fan of. Right, in 7 games in LEC summer so far, of the 7 games, in 5 of the 7 games, Nemesis didn't get more than 1 kill. So
lovely.
So
mid laner in Europe, by the way, just saying.
All I'm going to say is
that's a fun. I love numbers.
All I'm going to say is we discussed in previous shows in the LCS that 100 Thieves and Immortals were doing much worse because they had weaker mid laners, and we talked about why in this meta it is very difficult to have a weak mid laner because of the jungle carry meta. If you have no pressure...
Oh, he has the best jungler in the league as well, by the way. I'll just throw that out there. You know, no biggie, biggie. Just has the best jungler in the whole league.
This just goes to prove that you need a strong 1-2 punch at mid and jungle right now, because if you don't have that, even if you have a great jungler, you never have the pressure for the jungler to be able to farm efficiently or to make plays.
Ready for some irony, Monty? This was the guy who didn't get what Doinby was doing when Doinby had a monster jungler and just used his jungler to move all around the map and take over the whole fucking game and beat them. So just saying, when he got his Tian, what were you doing, homie? I tell you what, here's the problem LS has, right, is I think he's actually convinced these guys that as long as they explain why they lost the game on his stream, that's like 90% of a win in LEC. It's 0, I'm afraid. Like, when I say he can play defense, I mean the coaches can come on shows and play defense, explain themselves. Like, you don't get any championship points for making a really good argument on LS's stream. Like, that's just entertainment, believe it or not. You actually have to win the games.
But I think there's also like two things to it, right? I think that like right now the mid laners need to be very active. Like it's very much about like either having prio and then moving on to slow pushes inside and actually like pressuring the map or diving or denying CS or getting face or like whatever, like accelerating the game through mid, right? And Nemesis is not a player that does that, so that doesn't suit him at all. I don't know if he's capable. Who knows? But that's also along with my point about like I agree that on paper the draft against G2 was good and the plan was perfectly fine on paper, but I think for what Fnatic wants to do and what G2 wants to do, to me it just makes no sense, right?
That's fair. That's very
Makes
fair.
sense. Yeah.
I mean, frankly, his Galio, he didn't even, I know you haven't seen the game, Jez, but he didn't even look like he knew how to play Galio, like on a team fight level. I was watching him play, and it wasn't just the decision-making about when to pursue things. It was that when he got into team fights, the way he was positioning himself was quite poor, and the way he was using his taunt was quite poor, and the way he was using his flash was quite poor. So he just looked really uncomfortable on the Galio pick in every single way.
And the chances of him being a champion, quite poor.
That's what, I mean, at this point, you really have to wonder. I also, I guess what I don't get from Fnatic's perspective as well is that they were the team that was really emphasizing in the playoffs, and we talked about this on the show when we had Mac on, or Jesiz Cass on rather, about how they were kind of learning from Fnatic's playoff run when Fnatic was using the Senna and putting Hylissang on the carries in the support position. And what's so confusing to me about this is that Mad Lions is doing that now, but we're not seeing the Senna bans or the support bans that we know Hylissang can play. So it seems like they themselves have abandoned a strategy that they invented and is someone else is using effectively. And I have to believe they can use it effectively again. That's one of the weirdest things about Fnatic to me, is that they haven't gone back to that. In fact, they've kind of gone... They've tried it in a different way by like running Soraka Leona with the Graves, but that just seems like not the thing to do.
Here's what I think sucks. Unfortunately, like, listen, I don't normally do this much, but I'm just going to tell people now just so they don't get their hopes up. Like, don't expect to see Mithy on this show or any show while Fnatic is struggling, right? He's not the sort of person who comes on shows if his team's losing or he feels like it's not in a good place.
Which is a bummer, because I think he's actually doing a good job.
No, I would say I don't think he is. That's the problem.
Okay.
Right? Because from knowing Mithy for a number of years, to me, he's the person where it's about playing the correct way. Like, he wants you to play the champions that are strong, that make sense right now, to do drafts that make sense. And his logic when he was a player is like, if this doesn't make sense for us, then you need to get your shit together. You need to get on the level where you can play this jungle pick. You can play this top lane pick. It's not the guy who's like, right, let's band-aid everything. Let's do like the weakest move that makes us look not as bad and we sort of look like we're going to win the game. His things like famously, he's the guy I always say where what I loved about his mentality is people who thought he was toxic as a teammate don't get him as a teammate. His approach isn't like, we won the game, we're really good. It's like, they lost because they're shit and we're just better than those shitters. It's a way to keep yourself constantly going for the top spot. Well, the problem is this: you come into a team like Fnatic, there's some players might like that style, but if you're going to coach Fnatic, the ultimate band-aid team, while they've had Nemesis and Reckless, by the way, every year it's about finding, funnily enough, one or two styles that work and just play into that style. And every time you don't, that's pretty much when you lose. And every time you do, you win and you look like one of the best. To me, I don't know. I think it might be like an identity mismatch between the coach and the players, because some of these drafts here, like we're saying, it sounds like he's asking Nemesis to do stuff that I don't think Nemesis, I agree with Jesiz. I don't know if Nemesis is capable of doing that. Like, I don't think he's just going to change his whole perspective on how he plays a champion or how he plays the map just because you've done the right draft. So it's one of those scenarios. It reminds me a bit of Reaper on Cloud9 in the past. I always thought Reaper's drafts made sense in one of those LS simulators, but I sometimes thought it didn't make sense in the game. Like, I don't know if that player's going to do what you think he is with that champion dude. Yeah. So that's where I'm worried. I think Mithy could be an amazing coach. I just don't know if it's for this team. That's my problem. What do you think, Jesiz?
I mean, I think obviously Mithy he was a very great player, right? And I'm sure that he's a great coach as well. I'm sure of it, just because of like what he was doing as a player, right? He was very much coaching as well. And I don't know if he's like a bad fit for Fnatic or perhaps a good fit either. But I think I can just imagine it, right? Like they have a draft discussion, and then they're like, "Oh, should we ban TF?" And then maybe one of them is like, no, we don't have to ban TF. Like, I can play a shit ton of champions into it. And then Mithy's like, okay, what can you play into it? And then Nemesis is like, I can play this, Galio as well. And then Mithy's like, oh, okay. Well, if we want to win Worlds, we should be able to play that. So yeah, let's do that. Whereas I feel like it should just be like, no, Nemesis, you cannot play that champion. And I agree. In a perfect world, if we can play every champion in the world, every champion in the game, and we can play every style in the game, and we also play every style at like the highest level, yeah, then yeah, okay, we're straight up going to win Worlds, and it's going to be uncontested, right? But literally every single team has had limitations, like for Worlds as well. Like literally every team that won Worlds had limitations in terms of what they wanted to play, or not necessarily limitations, but they just had very strong preferences, right? And they shaped the meta of Worlds or MSI or like whatever. And I think it's just wrong. Like if that's actually how it were to go in Fnatic's draft talks, it's like he says, what can you play into TF? Nemesis says, well, I can play Galio. Of course I can play Galio. I'm a good player. It's like, no, you cannot play Galio. You're a good player. You cannot play Galio though. Like it should just go like that, you know? Like, and I think that's on the coach, because I know how players are. Like a lot of players are going to be exactly that way. They're going to be like, I'm a great player. I can play every fucking champion.
They mean it in solo queue though, right? Yeah, not necessarily
I feel like we're having a theme between our guests today, Thorin. I feel like we're having a theme of playing the ability to play every champion and how it results in.
Yeah, but here's the funny thing. This is the difference between NA and EU. notice the conclusion Jesiz came to, which is that if the player says, I can play this, and then you play the game and he can't, then actually it's on the coach. The responsibility still falls back to the coach.
Sure.
Pobelter thought that it excused the coach, that in his world, Jizuka said, give me a champion I can't possibly play, makes no sense. To him, when the coach then gives him it and loses the game, it's like, well, that was actually Jizuka's fault. So it didn't, because Jizuka isn't the boss. Jizuka's not the one who has to carry the results. He just has to play his game. So I agree. The ultimate responsibility, eventually, the coach has to say, you can't do that. I basically disagree.
Yeah.
You know, I know you think you can, but listen, show me it in another game elsewhere. This isn't the game for that. This is the game where you play the Azir or Boring Oriana or something, whatever it is you need to play.
And of course, it's not black and white, right? Like, of course, there needs to be a fine line between like the coach being, you know, open-minded and be like, okay, I'm sure you can actually do this, or I trust you in this specific scenario because it is straightforward, or it's similar to what we've been doing, or like whatever it might be, right? But again, there's also times where it's just gonna be like, why make it difficult on ourselves, right? And no, like, you don't have to play this champion. It's fine. Just, you know, there just has to be a fine line.
This is why I need to become a coach, Monty, because I'm the only one who has the fucking proper responses to these guys. Like when they say, like, I can play Galio, go, mate, you can barely play mid lane. Take this fucking Oriana, sit in that fucking corner. I know only last 2 weeks you have to decide, but it'd be the best 2 weeks ever. Tell you what, my reality show, episode 1, I'm telling you, banger, straight out the gates.
That's right. Thorin just behaves as though all his players have no emotions, and that doesn't affect any gameplay at all. It's the team of pure logic and reason only.
If we make it to Worlds, though, it gets even better because I come in with a Yamato cannon mask on and I go, guys, you got to play the way that you want to play. And, you know, they're going to remember us forever. I do like a whole speech, you know, it's so lifting. Everyone's crying at the end. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think it would do a much better job than probably a lot of coaches out there right now.
Wow. Harsh criticism. I don't know if Fnatic's going to just bounce back from this one, though, because I think that they have the same problems that a lot of teams are having. When you don't have the strongest mid laner right now, it's really hard to activate your jungle properly. And for those people who are kind of wondering why this team has gone down, I think that's a big part of it. I think also that, like I said, they're not playing to their strengths. I still have no idea. Like, what's so confusing to me is that not this past weekend's game, but the week before that, when they were literally playing against Mad Lions and they went Graves, Soraka, Nautilus, and they're playing into their own comp concept of Senna Wukong. I was like, really? That you guys are just letting Mad Lions style on you with the thing that you kind of invented here? Why are you letting them do that? Shouldn't you guys be the ones that are fighting over this pick or who understand playing it the most because you've had a longer time to practice with it?
Why is everyone talking shit on 2020? Y'all are saying about how this year's the worst year ever. Like, haven't you seen where Fnatic and TSM are at right now? I'd say let's wait and see how this one finishes. I want to just, let's see. I'm liking the way some of these moves are going. You got to find the little bright spots in the darkness, man. You can't just focus on the darkness. We must provide our own light. And you know what? Right now, I'm just enjoying watching League of Legends. It's a fun game right now.
What are you guys' thoughts, by the way, on all the shit talk on NA? Because I heard even the NA casters are flaming their own region right now.
Which I get that part's a bit whack. I agree. I do think it's a pretty bad region for that way.
I think a man can only take so much, but that's fine.
It's not as bad as Spring, put it that way. Like, Spring really was literally just Cloud9 here, and then nobody was ever going to catch them. Listen, at the moment, there's still no one's, like, on paper should catch them, but, like, pretty swift, the second, third, fourth, like, there's some decent play there. Like, if they get their game together, FlyQuest EG looks good, Team Liquid TSM can be all right. It's not terrible, but it's not like LEC looks a lot stronger. Like, here's the difference. If you look at some of the teams that like aren't the best, but like are looking strong, even Misfits, like some of these teams in some of the games they lost looked fucking good. Like, I think LEC looks straight fire right now. I'm loving it.
I think it's really tough, especially this last weekend, because the results were so variable and there were some truly awful games that happened in LCS this last weekend that I think I would have a hard time not snapping in that situation because what you're watching was so confusing and horrible in terms of quality of gameplay. And it hasn't been this bad in one concentrated like match week in a while, but there were just a lot of super bad games that happened this last week. And the teams that you would have expected to kind of do well lost a lot of the games, or even when they were winning, looked really terrible in terms of the quality of that win. So I would be frustrated too, is what I'm saying. And there was, I think, some very legitimate criticism handed out by the casters.
But I think it's really weird to me because I see a lot of the coaches getting recycled in NA, and when things are not working, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like something needs to change. Like if someone is not succeeding on one team, it's not because, like, at least over time, right? Like, it's not because he isn't fit with that, like he doesn't fit with that team. Maybe he just doesn't know what he's doing. So I really wonder if, because now like the region has been pretty bad for quite a while, right? I really wonder if they're just gonna change things up and maybe do no coaches, because at least in my experience, like every time I was playing, and there was a coach that maybe wasn't doing the greatest job or didn't have, the most positive impact on the team, it was just always better to have no coach, honestly. So I don't know, like I feel like something needs to change there. Because I was watching one game, and I think it was TSM versus FlyQuest, and I was completely baffled because I was seeing all these players that normally, at least like in the past to me, even 4 or 5 seasons ago, were actually playing at a higher level in terms of team fighting and individual knowledge, like individual macro, like game sense, like whatever, like all those things. They were literally playing better than they are now 4 or 5 seasons in the future, which just should not make any sense at all. Like, it doesn't matter if you're shit or if your team is shit. There should be no world where you're not, like, now as a season 10 team better than even SKT season 4. Like, you should be way better. That's how I see it.
Obviously, LCS must be near the time tombs from Hyperion. They're being affected by Merlin sickness and actually aging backwards. So forgetting all the knowledge that they knew.
That's a fire reference. They are in fact going back in time, and they will soon be murdered by the Shrike that is the LPL team. So it all makes sense. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
Where's Kassad? That's all I'm saying. Where's Kassad? Where's that legendary guy? Bring that guy out.
I think, Jesiz, like, it's not an unwillingness of the LCS teams not to seek good coaching, because when I speak to a bunch of the team ownership on the LCS side, they tell me we want to spend money on good coaches. There aren't import rules against coaches. Get anybody in the world, right, to come coach your team.
Most of the top player coaches there are Korean anyway at the moment.
So it's not that they don't want coaches. It's that they are struggling to identify who good coaches are. And I think there is a real hunger from
some of them even think Path's a good coach. So you can see where the league's at. It's really lost times right now.
Some teams don't have a whole lot of options because of the way they're operated in attracting coaching talent who believes that they can actually maintain control and authority over the roster.
Not everyone wants to be Jason Garrett, believe it or not. Another straight fire reference. Keep going.
But I do think that a lot of these teams are confused about where to look. And I think that's legitimate because there's a lack of leadership. And I've spoken on this subject many times, but one of the advantages that Korea has was recycling Brood War players who had been having 10 years of experience in gaming houses, who were in their 30s and 40s, who had that knowledge, who didn't necessarily know the game of League of Legends, but the head coach position was much more about practice management, interpersonal management, making sure that the strategic coaches were on point, kind of understanding the fundamentals of how to make a strong team, even if they didn't know the precise ins and outs of League of Legends at the same level of their strategic coaches. And I think I've told this story before, but when I left CLG, I helped design their coaching application process. And it resulted in a coach that, for reasons exterior to his coaching abilities, I would say, ended up not being a good fit and getting let go from CLG. But I was surprised at the quality of some of the candidates. There were like Diamond League of Legends. One guy was a Diamond League of Legends player who had played on a top 10 NCAA football team with a quarterback who is a star quarterback now in the NFL. I'm trying to be vague because I don't want to give this guy away.
I think you've already given it away, but keep going. I'm going to look that up myself and find out what it is. Keep going.
I'll tell you later. So he was a team captain on this NCAA football team, and he was familiar enough with League of Legends as a Diamond player. And so he had experience in a good athletic system, and he was a guy who applied to be the head coach of CLG, and we never would have found this guy, and he wasn't hired in the end, which he was the one I would have hired, but I didn't make the decision because I was no longer part of CLG. So I do think that there are some diamonds in the rough out there that you could at least go look for, and I think that opening coaching to a broad application process is something that a lot of teams don't do. And one of the interesting things that I designed...
To be fair, though, that was CLG, so I'm sure Weldon was like, NCAA football experience. That's worthless. Like, I watched the movie Hoosiers.
I think this was after Skara was when we did this, and I helped them with this. So it was Skara after me, and then I think they had this open call. And... They did pick a coach from this call, this like open application process. But I do think that more teams could benefit from that. And one of the things that we did as part of this application was...
It's also how Fnatic found Dale if people don't know.
Yeah. So here's what we did, which I thought was clever, if I can pat myself on the back, which is that we took applications, and then we've sorted through them, and we found candidates that we were interested in. And then what we did was we sent them a scrim VOD of CLG. So we knew that it was something that they had never seen before. And we sent them it with comms, player comms. And so we send them 1 hour long scrim VOD, and we say, watch this, listen to it. Now we need you to write up like a summary in I think it was like 500 words or fewer about the scrim. Identify what you believe are the most important issues that are happening in this scrim, and then tell us how you would fix these issues, or tell us some techniques you would use. So we weren't looking for huge depth of game knowledge, but sort of just like broader critical thinking and like how they might creatively introduce training concepts in order to fix some of the issues that they heard in this game, which might have just been a one-off in that game. It doesn't really matter, right? Because it's more of a theoretical exercise than anything else. So we did that, had them submit the written sample, and then what we did was we said, watch this game and talk over it with your webcam on so that we can see in real time how you would do a VOD review or something like that. Because we wanted to see, is this person charismatic? Are they pithy? Can they get to the point quickly while they're going over this game? So it was a really interesting exercise, I think, in head coaching. And it's not necessarily that person has to design the intricacies of every strat. In fact, having younger strategic coaches who are ex-professional players within League of Legends, but who might not have the interpersonal experience at that level, is really valuable. But that's what I believe in terms of head coach. I don't think head coach has to have the best in-depth game knowledge. I think the head coach can be more of a people manager and a strategic manager, and then you have coaches who are actually designing with better in-game knowledge the specific strategies that you're working on. But it all gets filtered through one individual. And I think in general, there hasn't been enough open application process for head coaches or for management positions. And I think that it could be very valuable to inject some of these people from outside of the scene who at least have enough League of Legends knowledge to function into the scene, and it might freshen things up a bit. So that's...
What do you think, Jesiz?
That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that kind of adds on to like what I was saying about that I legitimately think it's better to have no coach than a useless coach, because I think what's happening right now is that there are, I'm not going to name names, but perhaps a lot of useless coaches that think they have to do a certain job. Like they have to, after every single game, they have to do review because that's a part of their job description, right? They're like, okay, you guys did this bad, you did this bad, and they go through the entire game, and at the end of the review, the players got absolutely nothing, right? So what I think is way better, unless that coach is actually teaching you something, is if perhaps in that scenario, it's better to have no coach, because then suddenly all 5 players have to actually step up, right? And then they all have to be like, hey, actually, I played like shit. You played like shit. I think we should play it this way instead. And then it becomes more like less analytical and more like, hands-on. We need to change this, or we need to get better at this, right? And I think that, like, where I was going with it, I think it's very similar to what Monty was saying about having more of a manager-ish coach, because I've also had managers as coaches beforehand where, we would get rid of our coach and then our manager would step in as like the facilitator or something, right? And in a lot of cases, that was 10 times more valuable, because suddenly all 5 players knew that, okay, we have to fill a gap, like the coaching gap. And like everyone just started talking more. Everyone started, just coaching themselves and each other. And yeah, I mean, I think just actually, like, when I agree, like, it's very hard for management to see who's actually a good coach, like a good strategy coach, or just a good coach in general. Because even if you see them have good results, you can never really know, right? You can really not know if that guy's actually good or not, or if he got carried. So I think if I were to create a team and I had no idea who actually were to be a good coach, I would hire Thorin as my manager. You would be my head coach.
Oh,
And
sure.
then legit, I would have my 5 players that I knew were very, very talented individually, that were able to critically think themselves and that were somewhat competent.
Let them figure it out.
Then I would have you
You'd
as
make
my
G2.
manager. And yeah, no, but even without Mithy, like, I would legit just nowadays have Thorin as my manager, and then as I would find out like how my team would function and like what the strengths are individually and what they would figure out on their own through maybe the guidance, like the general guidance of Thorin, for example, then I would add a strategy coach that would benefit that, like that would like add on to what that team already wants to do,
Look for what
right?
you need. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think right now teams are legit just adding a coach because they have to, and that coach is trying to fulfill a job because he has to, and that makes no sense in my mind.
It's just following procedure mindlessly. Yeah, there's no
Yes.
logic to it. Yeah, agreed.
It makes no sense.
I'm amazed at some of the orgs that put together a lineup of players and then put a coach to them. It doesn't make sense. That's also one that's always blown my mind. Like, you can have a good coach, but you're just on the totally wrong team. You're like, what's the point of this?
Yeah, and you have to. I agree with Jesiz. You have to tailor it to every single situation, and I think that's why I think Grabs goes underappreciated over at G2, because Grabs is doing the job that Grabs needs to do with that roster, which is that he's facilitating the players to have the best kind of conversation and synergy. Because I don't think G2, the players on G2 are so smart and they're so capable that I don't really think they need, a lot of strategic insight, but they do need good management and they do need good structure around them. And I think Grabs is excellent at providing that. So it is about cultivating the right environment to the right group of players. But you can also, like you're saying, reverse engineer that, where you start with the right manager and then you find the right players to slot into that system around the strategic coaches. But it is rarely, I think, that well planned out, right? It's most people try and grab up all the players they can, and then they try and just kind of jam the coaches in around them who may or may not make sense with a specific roster or a specific system. And I think where we're seeing a lot of success on this right now is, so if you look at Cloud9, for example, you look at Reaper, and yes, Reaper is the head coach of that team, but the thing about Cloud9 is that Jack is involved in every single moment of decision making within that team. And in a way, Jack is sort of, he's got a good knowledge of League of Legends, but he's not a strategic expert in the game. But what Jack is doing is he is both GMing that team and he is serving the more kind of Korean style of head coach role, where he is the one who's saying, here is our team culture. Here is our practice schedule. Here is our workout schedule. Here are the kind of players in terms of attitude that we're going to go for and that we want to integrate into this roster. Here is what we expect out of our players in terms of performance or engagement in solo queue or engagement in meetings. And Jack is there for the scrims. He is there every single day, overlooking this team. So he is atypical as an owner in terms of doing that, but he has his own vision of what it's going to be. And I think that's the kind of role that he serves on this team, whereas Reaper and Rapid Star and Westrice are more of the kind of strategic coaches of it, as it were.
Yeah, fully. I mean, when I was in Fnatic after Worlds, the first thing I requested was that going into the next year, that we would have a director that knew what he was doing. So I referenced to like, look what Jack is doing for C9, like look at what Reginald is doing for TSM, right? Like, I don't know exactly what they do, but basically having someone there who's able to recognize if someone is competent or not, and then immediately make a change or immediately make like an ultimatum to a player, like fix your shit or it's over, like we lost. Like you need someone there to facilitate that, and then comes the coaching part, I think.
Well, I think you see that among the successful teams right now. Cloud9 is a great point because they are able to continue improving in a region that is terrible in comparison to them. Like this, in comparison to the rest of their competition, if Cloud9 can finish this split as strong as they did spring, I think this is the biggest gap between a top team in the rest of the field that we've ever seen in LCS history. So if they're able to maintain that throughout the course of a season, that is extremely impressive and is a testament to their leadership. And in LEC, look at what Mad Lions is doing. They are a very top-down designed team where they went ahead and they rebooted their entire roster after they rebranded from Splice, and they said, we're doing it with this very high-level sort of GM, head coach, strategic coach system, and we're going to bring in new players and introduce that into the system, which is effectively what Cloud9 has done as well over a number of years now. And that has been really effective. So if anything, I would think teams should be looking more at, like you're saying, look at Cloud9, look at Mad Lions, see what they're doing and what's been successful and try and emulate that.
Definitely.
And also, as we're pointing out here, another thing we need to do is, listen, without going on a whole rant, a lot of GMs are really fucking bad in League of Legends right now. So why not make this a hybrid role? Why not make head coach / director / GM one role? But that's the whole point. It's not just pick the players. It's like then have a say in crafting the team. It's like, I'd go the other way up. I'd take the really good coaches now, as you'll talk. You was referencing Youngbuck joining Fnatic there. I would do that. I would take the guys who at the moment are the best coaches and say, right, you get a promotion, mate. You're not the director. There's going to be a coach under you. You can still have say and influence your style, but you're also going to do the trades. I'd go that way. Whereas at the moment, it's almost like they're going top down. They're like, right, someone at the top of the org is the GM, and then we get a coach under here. I'd go the other way around. I'd go up, as it were, grassroots up.
Yeah.
Because the point is, think about the opposite. A guy who was a really good coach and shown some skill at working with social issues, I can promote him up. He's got the skills he's bringing up with him. The guy who comes top down, like we're saying, there's a guy coming in from outside who's like, right, what's this League of Legends business I'm going to learn? It's like, that's going to be a disaster. So I think that's the right approach to take. Anyway, is there any final topic, Monty?
I don't know. I thought that was very interesting. We're certainly happy to end there. Jez, is there any team that you want to talk about in the LEC in particular to round things out? Anything that you find interesting that's going on right now that's caught your fancy?
SK Gaming, I think.
Sure. So what do you think your strengths are this season? How have you guys...
Oh, sorry, I didn't let him answer. Yeah, my bad.
I mean, Crownshot's great. Let's talk about Crownshot a little bit. What do you think about him as a player coming into this roster?
I didn't know what to think before joining the team because I hadn't been watching that much LEC. So I didn't really, because I kind of went out when he came in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I didn't really know what to expect. But I think that he is a great player. He's really good mechanically, and he can play all the necessary champions. And he is, I think what is strongest about him and also all of the players is that they all have a very strong, like they're all very willing to improve and are very coachable. And I think that is like the biggest thing that I would want from a player, right? Like, that's why I think that rookies are very powerful right now, because they're just all so willing to move to a place that isn't their own little bubble. And I think that's very strong and very powerful.
Yeah, by the way, I just want to address something. I hear a lot of people out there in the community trying to build this narrative, right, that LS ruined Nemesis. Y'all have got it the wrong way around. Crownshot works with LS as well, and he is straight fire. Nemesis ruined LS. That's the right way around. There you go. You like that, boys? Over to you, Monty. What do you think, Crownshot? By the way, I'll say this. Crownshot was even good on the SKs that were bad. He used to look pretty good last year, even when they were just looking terrible. Like, he was it was him and Selfmade who were basically the shining lights on that team.
I think for me, look, Crownshot's been great. I do have some concerns about SK overall. I don't expect Jesiz to comment on this, but when we saw them in the Vitality game and the AD carry pool got super pinched and Crownshot had to go on to Misfortune, SK looked a lot worse, because I think Crownshot being on these super powerful AD carries has been a very big point of strength for the team overall. So I'm looking forward to the next few weeks if teams try to emulate that strategy to see how exactly that SK is going to react, because Genax has been good for a player that just role swapped, but at the same time, he is a player that is just role swapped. So I don't know how much of a burden you can put on him if Crownshot is super pressured. And I think Zaze, again, has been good, but is a relatively unknown player and has relied a lot on Azir play. So I do.
Be polite. Let's just not talk about the jungler. Over to you.
Yeah, and there's some jungle issues, one might say.
No, we'll just be polite. Yeah. So, what do you think, Jesiz?
But I think so. I do wonder if there's a code to crack here with SK a little bit in terms of how you can draft or how you can ban against them that might have been exposed a little bit by Vitality. But I look forward to seeing if that's true in the coming weeks as teams kind of adapt. However, I think Crownshot has been a super great bright point on this roster and has looked consistently really good and in conversation, at least, for probably a top 3 AD carry in the LEC.
Yeah, I think he definitely is a strong point, and I think we have drafted around him quite a bit, and like it played very much around him as well. I do think though that it is very hard to say what the limits are of this team, like what we're really capable of, and like what the strengths are completely, because I think that there are players like Zaze and even GenX on top lane now, who just have a lot more room to like potentially become something that they're not showcasing right now, right? So for me, that's like, I don't know, that's really scary for other teams, because if we're actually able to, if these players are able to showcase something that like fits really well into what League of Legends is right now, then then it's not just the Crownshot show, right? And I think on that note, like Zaze, like coming into the team, I think he's relatively similar to Nemesis. Like he's very just grounded on his lane, and he plays his own lane, and he plays consistently and all that stuff. But surprisingly, he is very strong mechanically and very creative, and he's just not really been like he hasn't had his eyes open this whole time. I feel like legit, I'm coming in and I'm coaching this guy, and I feel like he just opened his eyes. He's been playing League of Legends with his closed eyes, and I wonder if it's the same with Nemesis. If he's legit just been playing League of Legends with his eyes closed this whole time, and he just happened to go and get individually coached by a guy who wants him to play the way he's already been playing. So I don't know if Nemesis is also, for example, able to broaden the way he plays and become a more nuanced player and more creative player. And like I think, at least from my perspective with Zazie, like I think he has so much more to say in terms of gameplay.
I think it just hit the static mid laner super hard this meta too, right?
Yeah,
it's been extremely punishing for them.
And is there anyone going to get a violin out and cry for those guys?
No. No, I mean, I think that's one of the exciting developments in the last year, and with Fun Plus Phoenix winning Worlds, has been this really dynamic style of all over the map mid laning, which is a natural evolution of the game, right? I think that this was inevitable. The better teams got it at playing League of Legends overall, the more you can use the timings around the mid lane as the center point of the map to affect the side lanes and to affect the jungle. Like, this was inevitable in my mind, that teams and players were just going to get better at this. But you combine that with the current meta that we have, a natural evolution now with a very distinct way of balancing the game that is causing static mid-meta to be super unfavorable. And I think that it's just kind of a recipe for disaster for these mid laners, and we're probably going to see a lot of them phased out, honestly.
This is why you don't talk shit against me, because I've got literally the fates on my side. I write history, and as a result, you know what? You're fucked around, talked shit on the wrong guy, and now I've made all your favorite mid laners frogging. Enjoy. You're welcome.
It's true. It has become a curse. All right. Well, I think we'll just wrap the show there. Seems like a good point to end up on. Thanks for joining us and talking about SK and LEC, Jesiz. We will not be back next week, actually. Oh, no.
TSM finally got to us, didn't they? We're fired up. I knew it. All that like I did at the beginning of the episode.
Nobody is fired yet. We will be taking a bit of a break because I am going to a place that is not going to have good enough internet for me to have video calls like this.
Berlin? Oh, no, sorry. You're on hold.
Australia? No. I'm going to be taking a sort of break for the week, because this is the only chance this summer I'm going to have to do that, basically. So take a little holiday for myself, as it were, working holiday, more or less. And so we won't be back next week, but we will be back the week after that. Again, follow Insight on Esports for everything: Twitch, YouTube for this show. Podcast still in the same place. And we'll see you in a couple weeks. So sorry we won't be able to discuss that, but thank you very much to Jesiz for joining us.
Thank you very much.